So the problem we are dealing with in South Africa today is actually looting. It is no longer corruption. Do I think the ANC is the party that needs to carry us forward? No. You can't take the ANC on at their strength,
Which is?
which is a massive national footprint embedded in communities running on the basis of T-shirts, food parcels, and grants. Load shedding is a creation of the current people who are governing. The solution is not complex.
King David Studio podcast.
You know, we've been going on this drive of talking to different political formations and civil societies, really, to say there is a need for us to get the message across, the message of getting South Africans not only talking, but participating in this year's elections. And I've made a commitment to myself that I'll speak to as many people who are taking part in these elections as possible. But the most important person who's taking part is a citizen of this country. And I came across a formation, I'll call it that. It'll be explained better, called the Citizen. But how it's spelled is different. It's Citizan. With an S, yes, of course, it's in plural. And I managed to get hold of Jan Moganwa, who's the leader of this formation. Rewe, I hope you're well.
I'm good, Brad Deza. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I'm glad you made it. You and I have done some work together. That's part of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And my interest was sparked from there. But I'm curious to know, what exactly is the Citizen? What are we talking about here? Before we speak about your background, I'm curious to know, what is this?
Citizens is actually a very simple concept, Brad Deza. So the idea behind citizens is we have to be encouraging more professionals and the youth to participate in building a better South Africa, right? The reason why professionals specifically is because that is the skill base. Those are the people with the skills that we need to build a better country. Until we get those people excited, then we are going to bemoan the fact that we have people who are in government but without the skills. Now, professionals have been said to not be participating as much as they should in democracy. And hopefully we get to touch on some of the reasons why. I don't think it is for lack of interest. Partly it is because it is very difficult to participate as a professional. So if I invite professionals to the next fill-up FNB stadium, chances are they are not going to show up.
But why is that? They would fill up if Casper Nyovest was performing.
I think that's entertainment. Entertainment is not an indication of political positions. I think the nature of professional jobs is they don't allow you, even by virtue of your contract with your employer, if you are employed, or if you are a business owner, you are very careful to not be associated with a particular political position.
That's true.
Because that presents a lot of risks for you. But does it mean professionals don't have views? Of course they have views. We all get to hear them, armchair commentators. We get to talk about them.
When we're having fun, when we're watching
soccer and all of that.
Yes.
But the voices just don't come out when they need to come out for different reasons. And what we are seeking to do is to say, within the comfort of your group or your home, we are largely present ourselves online. That's how you engage us. But that you can do within the comfort of your home or wherever you are. What we are interested in professionals contributing is actually largely their skills. Because what we intend to do is, over the next 10 years, we hope to build a base of about 1 million informed and engaged South Africans who then over time will change the course of history. Now, if you've got 1 million engaged people, that clearly does not win you elections in South Africa. But the thinking is, these are the breadwinners, right? The idea is, if you can be able to convince the breadwinners, then you don't even have to get to the rural areas, because the breadwinner reaches out that far. So if I'm able to convince you today that Citizens is a movement you need to be part of, I don't have to go and find all your relatives and your friends or whatever. It will actually be up to you to go and say, guys, I think we have found the option, the alternative that makes sense for us. So that's essentially what we are after. We are never going to have a membership of 5 million, 10 million, and all of that. So think about us more along the lines of AfriForum and structures like that that have been able to build an engaged base. AfriForum has about 300 to 350,000 members. Those members pay about 150 rand on a monthly basis. That's about 50 million in a month. That money is then able to be used for specific causes in the interest of their members.
Do you adopt a similar funding model as AfriForum in that regard?
It's complex, in the sense that AfriForum largely represents Africans' interest groups, right? And if you are going to be pursuing engagement of professionals in South Africa, you expect the bulk of those people to be Black South Africans. So although we are not a racial party, by virtue of the proportions of populations in South Africa, you expect the bulk to be Black.
Yeah.
But many Black people are not yet in the space of committing to a cause. I don't know why, Brad Daza.
Let's analyze it. Let's try to analyze this. Let's try to understand.
I mean, if I asked you, Brad Daza, if you have ever contributed to Save the Rhino, chances are you haven't, right? And my area of interest is human behavior, right? My hypothesis will be actually part of what we're dealing with is lack trauma. I call it lack trauma. Why do I call it lack trauma? We come from lack. We come from poverty and all of that. So when you come from poverty, your mentality has always been about how much can I gather.
Okay.
And within our families, we always know someone else who needs help and all of that. To get psychologically to a space that says I can give, I think will take us quite a bit of time.
Wow.
It is the trauma that I think we are dealing with. I mean, if I ask many Black professionals, they would have seen emails from their university saying, "You're alumni, we want you to contribute." They can't say they did not see those emails.
We see them. We get them all the time.
If you say, "Did you contribute?" And it's not about the money, because as I say, it is not like the members of AfriForum are contributing 10,000 rand a month.
It's 150
it's 150 bucks.
Wow.
So it's not a financial issue. It is a psychology issue that we need to get over, over time.
And it's money that to spend it is not complicated.
It's not complicated.
However, we're not...
Absolutely. We're just not there. So the way we are going to solve for it, clearly, we are not interested in the Rebecca Oppenheimer type funding, because the South Africa knows the implications of that. So for us, it is how do we convince about 1 million, South Africans over the next 10 years to contribute $100, but you're going to have to show them a cause. You're going to have to show them, I'm solving this for you. And that's really our immediate challenge.
Otherwise, they're going to accuse you of squandering their money.
No, absolutely. So we need to convince South Africans that we are solving something for them. And that's what we'll be doing over the next few months, is driving specific causes. We bemoan, for example, we'll touch on some of the priorities. We bemoan the cost of education, especially in private schools. We want to challenge that because we believe that needs to be regulated. So those are some of the things that we think will resonate with the audience that we are after.
Do you know, we are here. Let's carry on this point. Let's compare you to AfriForum based on the example that you used, and talk about the politicization of movements such as those. It's easy for them to start are political, but they end up becoming politicized. What is your position in that regard?
So when people say, am I political or not political? Frankly, we don't know what that means, right? Being political is not even a choice you make. By being part of a nation governed by a state that is appointed, you are political. All we are debating is the extent to which you see yourself
True.
as a
Are
politician.
you a political participant?
I think about the role of NGOs. There are so many NGOs that are sabotaging the developmental agenda of government, including whether we are going to go and extract gas and all of that. Those are political. They don't call themselves political. The Helen Zuzman Foundation, it's political.
It's been vocal on a lot of issues.
Politicians?
Yeah.
The Free Market Foundation, are they politicians? No, but are they political, right? So one of the things we constantly say to people is you can no longer say you are not interested in politics because the consequences of politics stalk you everywhere you go. You can't say I'm not part of it. We have all been trying to find solutions away from politics, but actually the consequences of politics are following us everywhere we go. And this is why today, and I'll argue that most South Africans pay as much as 80% in tax. Even though if you look at the tax table, you will never find 80%. But where does the 80% come from? You have had to go and solve for yourself the things that in the past a state would have solved for you. We call it white tax.
So you're paying
right?
tax
Absolutely.
in Africa. Your solar panels.
Security tax, energy tax, water tax, private school, so the extent to which things that used to be part of your disposable income, now you have had to commit them to resources to services that the state would have had to provide. That's the reality of what we are dealing with. So you can't say, I'm not interested in politics, and then complain about the consequences. And this is why then, as citizens, we would like to bridge that gap and say, listen, there's a way to participate without being a politician.
But I wonder if the lack of participation that you speak of, what is its long-term implication? Because that's what has inspired citizens to exist. What is the long-term implication of this continuous lack of somebody else will do it?
Well, then somebody else will do it. That's for sure. There's going to be somebody else, but you are not going to be happy with the results, right? So the implications of it is things are going to get worse and worse and worse. Because if you think about it, think about security, right? Both you and I are of the days when trailer doors and butler bars were a thing. So we thought that was enough. You went and found a standalone house, you put in butler bars. The next thing that came is put an electric fence in a standalone house. And then the next thing was standalone house does not work. Actually, go and find a security complex. And so we keep on trying to solve for the system that is busy breaking apart. But actually, in reality, we still have to live with the consequences of this system because we must drive on the roads. You must be saved by the traffic light. And I feel sorry for parents because parents go and create this safe space for their children. And I've already said, I've said a number of times, for me, the trigger for I need to do something is when I realize that some of my older kids are starting to leave home. And I'm like, no, hold on. I've been creating this safe space for them.
And now they're about to leave.
But now they leave. What type of system am I handing them over to? Do they know that they are at risk at a traffic light? Do they know that?
Because you raised them in an environment that saved them
absolutely
from that, even the knowledge of it.
I raised them in jail.
Yes, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So now they're all adults, they can go and create their own lives and all of that. And now they are completely under the safe space I have created. That's really when it dawned on me that until we all realize that we have to do what we can to make the system function, then we have problems.
You put it so simply, and for the first time, I don't have kids, but I deal with my nieces and nephews almost like like in that position, almost someone that is parenting. And my nephew has to go to school and find his own place now.
Yeah.
And walk from where he lives to school.
Yeah.
It's a 5-minute walk in a neighborhood that I'm very familiar with. It's around the Auckland Park area.
Yeah.
But I'm already nervous about
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
I'm already nervous about that 5 minutes walk that he's likely to take his laptop with him.
Absolutely.
Because he needs to use it at school. And I'm thinking, how do we overcome that 5-minute walk?
Absolutely. and I'm not here to say we can build a state that does not have corruption, right?
And crime.
And crime.
It'll happen anyway.
But I always say to people, so I grew up in a rural area. We can talk about some of that. But the area I come from is a big farming community. A farmer of mealies almost always knew that there are parts, on the side of the road, there are mealies that are going to disappear, He factored that into the plans of the harvest, But he never ever factored the whole, half the field disappearing.
That's true.
So even retail shops, they plan for shrinkage. They call it shrinkage. They know that Walmart in US has got a big shrinkage issue now. The amount of goods that are stolen in store is increasing at a crazy rate.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between shrinkage and looting. Right? So what we saw in the July unrest the other year, that was not shrinkage. That was not someone going to macro stealing a few things. That was, I want to take everything and even destroy the shelves and the building, right? So the problem we are dealing with in South Africa today is actually looting. It is no longer corruption. It is,
take everything.
Take everything.
Yeah.
Corruption is I need to build a road for 10 billion, then I build it for 12 billion. That's corruption. There is a quality road that could have cost 10 billion, cost 12 billion. Looting is I need to build a road for 10 billion. I've spent 100 billion. There is still no road.
Yeah.
Now, you will think this is just a fictitious case, but that is happening with some water project in Limpopo. Billions have been spent, but there's still no water.
Sure.
We are dealing with a very different problem where all South Africans have to participate. And our appeal is always that maybe for our generation is too late. So we plead with people to say, if you cannot do it for yourself, at least do it for your children and your family.
Yeah.
What
leads you personally to this? Give me a bit of your background. What prompts you? Because you could live your life and move on.
I could live my life and move on.
Yes. Give me your professional background.
I'll come to the professional background, but I want to tell you some exciting things that I will touch on later in this. In the meantime, people must click like and subscribe. One,
I like that you do that.
Right, I'm going to tell you why the ANC is going to come out at 65%.
Okay. 65%.
65%.
That's higher than where they are now.
65%.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you the similarities between EFF and the DA.
Okay.
Those parties are a lot more same than people imagine. I'm going to tell you why democracy destroyed the ANC, interestingly.
They destroyed the ANC, not necessarily destroyed the South African Republic.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Destroyed the ANC and by extension, the South African Republic.
Yeah.
Democracy is at the center of that.
Yeah.
And then if we still have time, at the end, I'm going to tell you my favorite politician at the moment for a very specific criteria.
Okay, cool. All of that is coming.
That's coming. That's coming.
You're like a professional broadcaster.
That's coming. That's going to be very interesting.
We mustn't forget. What is it? ANC and Democrats.
ANC at 65%.
And ANC at 65%. In this election.
In this election.
Wow. Okay.
ANC destroyed by democracy.
Yes.
Why EFF and DA are a lot similar than what many people imagine.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you about my favorite politician if we are thinking about choosing politicians going forward.
Sharp.
That's going to be spread somewhere in this mix. We will get to that.
We'll get there.
So
background. Where you from?
So ke Mopedi wa kwa Matlala. My village is Simaneng in Hamatlala. Like it's a nondescript rural village, as rural as they come. I grew up there. I went to school there. The usual public school, community school, all of that, right? So the reason why in many of these conversations I don't dwell too much on myself, it is actually because my story is not that different to the story of most South Africans. Grew up in a big family, with just really a lot of people, by the way, they will say single mom or grew up with a grandmother. And often white people say, these black people are so irresponsible. Why is everyone growing up
without a father?
Without a father?
Yes.
And what they don't understand is that is actually the legacy of the migrant labor that used to come to villages and take the fathers and bring them to largely the big towns for mining. So actually the fact that you hear a lot of people say, I grew up
without a father
or with my grandmother and all of that, is not because black people are just, they are irresponsible people.
Yes.
It is an architectured outcome. And so that was true for many people. It was not just me. What actually gets me to achieve a level of some level of professional success is because I consider myself a member of a very lucky generation. Because we are the generation that benefited from the political transition. I am not in the space of 30 wasted years and all of that, because I actually think that's just rubbish. We know if your starting point talking to South Africans is the last 30 years have been a complete mess, you have lost many South Africans because many of them know that's not true.
Yeah.
It cannot be entirely true. You can have a conversation around we started fairly well and then the wheel started to come off. That's an honest conversation. But I see many people of my generation who have found a favorite pastime thing is to bash the last 30 years. And I'm like, hold on, you are on TV, on national TV, as a black person in South Africa, and you want to tell me that the last 30 years that brought you there has been a complaint. Don't you see the contradiction?
Don't you see your own benefits from the 30 years?
And that's the point. So elections happened in 94. I matriculate in 95. So I could not have asked for a better time to matriculate. At that time, there's a lot of push, what we now call NSFAS, then it was called TEFSA, right? I could then apply, go to VETS and all of that, whatever. And I call myself lucky, not because I don't think I worked hard. I worked hard. But the reason I call myself lucky is imagine someone else who had the same aptitude, but happened to matriculate in 1970. And let's even say they are smarter.
Yeah.
But they matriculate in 1970.
Where there are no opportunities.
What are the prospects for that person?
Yeah.
So I really hate, part of this behavior of my generation of suddenly making it sound like they are the best thing that ever happened, when in fact you are just merely a beneficiary of the political transition. By saying merely, I am not saying you don't have the aptitude or you haven't worked hard, but you need to be able to acknowledge that we were the recipient of the luck, political luck that people died for, by the way, of 1994.
Sacrificed their lives. They moved out of the country.
Absolutely.
Yes.
To be clear outright, do I think the ANC is the party that needs to carry us forward? No. But the way I'm thinking about it, I'm not thinking about it in the sense of 30 wasted years. I'm thinking about it in terms of how, for example, Brad, how a relay is run. A relay is run, let's say one person starts the race. There is a point where that person is fatigued, right?
Yeah.
And we need to have the maturity to say, bruh, you are tired.
Hand over.
Can you hand over, right? We can't, the temptation to go rubbish the person, to say, the last 100 meters, you were crap and whatever, and all of that, whatever, is not helpful. because that risk, downplaying the big part that that runner has been able to cover to set us up. I find many leaders are terrible in terms of telling an evolution story. They can't resist the temptation to say, we are the best thing you have been waiting for. Everything else has been crap. I think leadership is about saying to people, okay, people, some of them with good intention, got us here. Is this still working? No, it's not working. So how do we evolve from here, given that things have changed?
Let's talk about it from a perspective of the ANC itself.
Yeah.
Because that baton can be handed over to people within it.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily people from outside.
Absolutely.
Like in a race.
Absolutely.
In a race, there's a group of four
Yes.
runners.
Yes.
And all these runners belong to the same team.
Yes.
And they keep handing over to the next one.
Absolutely.
In a natural progression of any organization,
Yeah.
we now say we already have Jan who's coming.
Yeah.
And they're already being groomed for position of leadership.
Yeah.
Do you think that has happened in the fashion that you're describing? You're describing handing over to the next generation and to the next generation with fresh ideas.
It hasn't, and I can come to that. There are certain things that I have learned, as part of kind of like my professional, and maybe just to close the professional background.
No. That's I know we're talking about it,
yeah.
but that's why as you answer that.
Yeah, I want to close it because it will answer some of that question. So.
Perfect.
When I grew up, wanted to be a lawyer. My brother is a teacher. He comes to me and says, very interesting. You're not going to become a lawyer. There's this new thing that's growing. Everyone wants to become a CA. You're going to make a lot of money and all of that. So I come to Wits to study accounting. It was a disaster. I hated the damn thing. The thing I like subjects where there is no one answer. I like subjects where there is multiple views, and between that you can find the idea that you have to be working towards this one specific answer. I found it frustrating. But in the process, I found a computer in the library. Okay. Interestingly, what I ended up doing, I ended up becoming an IT developer, a software developer.
Wow.
And not a lawyer and not an accountant. And over time grew into banking. Even though my studies at Wits were initially a disaster, I had a score to settle with them. So after getting my BCom in economics with UNISA, I went back to Wits to settle the score. And so
how did you settle that score?
I did the postgraduate diploma there and I did the MBA there. I might also do a PhD there. That score is still not settled,
You're holding a grudge.
And I've been lucky. Then I grew into banking. My last big job was the chief executive of retail banking in ABSA. Yeah. That business controlled about 60 to 70% of the profits of ABSA.
Which is us.
Absolutely.
The people who use the banks every day.
Absolutely. Through all of that, I had opportunities of studies at Harvard in US. I have been very lucky. The issue I have is people with my type of luck looking at the others and say, I did well, you stuffed up. And this is why, and I know, Herman Mashaba is not here to defend himself. I don't like the story that says, I have been successful, so therefore any one of you could have been successful. Because we have not created the safe net for growth and development that allows you need to lift the level for, as many people as possible. So there are people who I went to school with who I think many of them were smarter, but they just did not have the turn of luck. Maybe what they needed was a therapist to work with them because they were dealing with challenges. Now, ask anyone who has grown up in the rural community schools if there was a therapist to talk to.
Of course not.
Even
in the townships, even now.
Even now,
yes.
Right? So we need to create an environment where it is possible for an average person
to make it.
Yeah. Right? The fact that there is some soul survivor or whatever, it's actually a distraction. It can hide the fact that we've got many issues. So now let me come back to the ANC story. And I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, Brad Deza, about human behavior. So, although, I am a techie and then become banker, all of that, and which is really what I do now, I still do digital services stuff, is my interest is in human behavior. The way to make sense, people want to be individuals, I get it, but actually human behavior is highly predictable, highly predictable. The way to understand human behavior is this. So, what are the things that are universally known about human behavior? One, we are all driven by self-interest. All of us. All of us. So, if you want to understand why a person behaves a particular way, you then have to ask the question, how is this serving their interest?
Okay.
If you understand that about human behavior, you will not be puzzled, for example, next time Helen Zula posts on X, right? Instead of you being upset and angry and all of that, you will actually just understand that Helen Zila is speaking to her constituency and her constituency wants to hear what she's saying. It is not about you.
Yes. Even if it offends
Even if it offends you.
Yeah.
If it offends you, tough. Helen Zila is not talking to you. There are people who wants to hear her saying that.
Yeah.
So we are all driven by self-interest. Underlying that self-interest, in terms of pursuing your interest, you can achieve that by either doing good or doing evil. Now, believe it or not, good and evil also is in all of us. All right? There's times you might feel like mooring someone somewhere. There's time you might feel like talking to someone.
Same circumstances.
Same circumstances, right? So the idea that there are bad people out there and then you are the good one is actually quite misplaced. Underlying that good versus evil is fear versus love. Whether you choose to do good or evil often is a reflection of, are you using love in that space or are you using fear? So these things are universal about human beings, right? And the reason I'm starting there, Bradeza, is if we use ANC as an example, you were talking about the transition and all of that. This is where I want to deal one of the questions I told you earlier. Why the ANC has been destroyed by democracy. Because I know you thought I was going to forget.
No. I've read. I won't forget. You may forget, but I'm not.
So let's start with the ANC, because your question was the transition. Has it been handed over?
Succession issues.
So here is the thing. Of the three, let's call it the major parties in South Africa, the most democratic organization, without doubt, is the ANC. Without doubt, is the ANC. Interestingly, I said that democracy has actually destroyed the ANC. So here is, and by the way, it is the same democracy that destroyed COPE, is the same democracy that destroyed Mampela Rampela's party, right? Because you had parties that were in the early formation and they immediately played out democracy by saying we are going to an elective conference. What does that do? It immediately changed friends into enemies.
Yeah.
Because if we are going into an elections, we are opposing parties.
Yes.
I'm going to have
within your same...
Absolutely. Yes. I'm going to have to not only talk about what I can do well, I'm also going to have to say how terrible you are. All right? So if you think about the three major parties, they are not so... DA is not a democratic, no matter what they say. EFF is not a democratic party. What do I mean by that? They might go through an elections process, but they all have some form of a central command that ultimately makes the decisions on what happens.
Yeah.
Actually, that has been important in sustaining those parties. Because if you really think about EFF, there has not been contestation of power in that organization because the central command held together.
Yeah.
Now,
are you saying the same applies to the DA?
Same applies to the DA, the Federal Council, and I mean, no matter what they say on their website, in reality, whatever happens goes to the Federal Council. The Federal Council basically being chaired or run by Helen Zille, make decisions on what happens inside the DA. And I'm not even saying that's good or bad. All I'm saying is it has been able to retain a measure of control and discipline within the party. Now, what happened to the ANC? I don't want to go to the long history. The important thing is what happens in the democratic space, right? So 1990, around the 90s, negotiations are happening. Who were the leaders of those negotiations? Largely Owar Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and maybe some of the people that came out of the SACP, Joe Slovo. But let's say those were the main players. So there was some form of central command inside the ANC.
Yeah.
And this is why when Nelson Mandela comes out of prison, Nelson Mandela then goes to an elective conference and becomes the president of the ANC. You will notice that Mandela was not contested in those elections. Why? Because even though someone like Chris Hani expressed an interest to contest election, the central command made the call. And so by the time the elections happened, Mandela was uncontested. There's a whole lot of other conspiracies around whether Chris was ever forgiven for that, but that's none of my business. I don't want to go there, right? Mandela was not contested. Similarly, Mandela goes into second term. Mandela was not contested. But at the same time, people who were part of the central command start to either get old or die.
Pass away.
OR passes on in 93. Interestingly, the same year that Chris Hani passed on. So there were two big losses for the ANC or the tripartite alliance in that year.
Yes.
Right? The Joe Slovos and others are starting to get old, right? But there is still some form of structure because Mandela imposes himself. I don't think Mandela was the most democratic, and there is a space for an autocratic leader. But I think that was required at the time, and Mandela played that role, right? So Mandela then essentially chooses Mbeki as the successor. Of course, there is a fallout with people like Cyril and all of that who were seeing themselves
next in line.
As next in line, right? Mbeki was not contested. Second term, Mbeki was not contested.
I think I remember the speech when the first time Mbeki was president.
Yeah,
there is a speech from Mandela.
Yeah,
to the party, but almost indirectly to Mbeki.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That speaks of pride and things like that.
Absolutely.
So you can tell that it almost felt like he was told what to do as the president of the ANC, but he wasn't entirely happy with the decision.
Absolutely.
But he had to apply it.
Yes. So Mandela becomes the last header of the central command, right? The old man then retires, is aging, starts to have health issues and whatever. Mbeki attempted to re-establish that central command with the so-called, especially using the so-called class of 96, which was made of a number of politicians around him. But the challenge is that group did not come with credibility in the mass of the ANC.
Sure.
Right? It was seen, you started to hear words like aloof and not in touch and all of that and whatever. The wheels completely come off going into Polokwane conference because there the ANC had no one at the center controlling anything.
Yeah.
So this became a fully democratic organization. So for the first time in democracy, you saw contestation between two parties in Polokwane.
Even when Mbeki was asking for third term.
Absolutely.
Within the party.
Yes.
And that questioned and misinterpreted that it could be third term as president, which would have been impossible because the constitution would have said no.
Absolutely.
However, the ANC's constitution would have allowed a third term president.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that plays out and this becomes a democratic institution.
Yeah.
Now, democratic institution means actually choices that are made by numbers. Right?
For the first time.
For the first time.
Yeah.
Why that matters to your question of succession. then the debate became who can bring the numbers.
Oh. So is it the wider numbers?
The
South
wider
African numbers and the ANC
and the ANC numbers.
Yeah.
So if you were someone like a Trevor Manuel, let's say you had the competency, but you didn't have the numbers.
No constituency.
No constituency.
Yes.
And that's what you are seeing in the current ANC. By the way, EFF is going to be dealing with the same issues. The people who are bringing you the numbers are not the same as the people you believe they have the skills to be able to govern. So that's what actually starts to happen to the ANC. With the numbers, it opens the door for what? For money. Because if you can buy votes, you will have the numbers and then you are in. So
and this can translate from the big ANC to the small ANC.
Absolutely.
When you're talking about smaller regions and municipalities and all of that. Now.
Absolutely. So, then your question has to be, okay, is the elections in the ANC able to raise up people by skills, or is it able to raise them up by constituency and noise?
And popularity.
Popularity.
Yeah.
So therefore, even if there was handover and succession and all of that inside the ANC, that has become fully democratic. That succession is not decided by skills. You know, I always forget sort of the premier of Gauteng before the current one.
Who was that? Oh, Ndate Makhura.
Ndate Makhura.
Yes.
People like Ndate Makhura, I feel sorry for, because I genuinely think he's a competent guy. But I doubt he has the constituency, the popularity to be able to rise to the top. So my point, Pradeza, is that even if there was succession, that succession is not the handover of power to people with competency, but it is going to be by popularity. So that still does not solve the challenge we face in South Africa.
Are you saying historically then what the ANC was able to do in the Mandela days, in how Mbeki got appointed, even how OR stayed as a president for so long, there's benefit to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's benefit for that. If you think about all the lasting parties in South Africa, without exception, you will not find them to be democratic.
The party itself.
The party itself. UDM, do you think? I mean, you can go through each one of this and whatever.
Yeah.
The parties that try to be democratic too early,
the democracy works against
the democracy works against them.
Then one can easily say that the Malema approach works.
Absolutely.
In that regard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you want staying power, right? There has to be some form of autocracy, central command. That's what makes EFF work. That's what makes DA work. I think people have been confused with how you govern the party versus how you govern South Africa. I truly believe now I've had people saying we need a benevolent dictator and all of that. Well, listen. Wait until you have a bad dictator.
Then you realize you don't need a dictator at all.
Absolutely. When you talk about Roman Empire and whatever, the first person to say, I'm going to declare myself an emperor was Julius Caesar, and he said it is temporary. And then, because once I'm done fixing, because I'm a good guy, once I'm done fixing what I need to fix, I'm going to pass power back to the Senate.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason we know about succession of emperors is because no one ever got to the point where they said, now we are done, I'm handing over this thing. So I want to be clear, South Africa has to remain democratic as a country, right? But that does not necessarily mean the parties have to follow the same model as the country.
Let's bring that theory into play.
Yeah.
If it works for political parties, why doesn't it work for the country? Why would you apply white paint, which
Yes.
is a measure of autocracy
Yeah.
for the parties, but you don't want to bring it to the country.
No, because as a country, we have to have some form of insurance that if we don't like the leader, we will
We can
change
get
them.
rid of
It's
you.
actually really that.
But the same applies to the party.
Yeah, the party can say that, but all I'm saying is for the sustainability of the party, the party that went straight to being democratic. You know, Dr. Mampela Rampela is a smart person, but she's going to be commentating from the couch, not because she didn't want to play a role in democracy, but because the party went to democracy too early. I actually, to bridge the gap between those two positions, Brad Days, I think there's a level at which a party can mature so much that it can then say, how do we become a lot more democratic and all of that?
And it's an open conversation where there's no exchange of monies and buying of people.
Absolutely. But you need to reach a level of maturity. The parties that went there too early then just died.
Let's apply that same theory again to councils, municipalities.
Yeah.
Because we've seen them crumble because of numbers.
Yes.
Where we were friends today, and tomorrow you were friends with them.
Yes.
No longer my friend.
Yeah.
And now I'm left thinking that we were together in this thing.
Yes.
Doesn't the same issue apply? Because numbers, it's still a numbers game.
It's still a numbers game, but when it comes to issue of what happened at a local government, at a provincial level, I'm not even going to go down that path because we think that political layer for a country the size of South Africa, that layer is unnecessary. You see, Pradesa, think about it this way. There are bureaucrats with skills that have applied for jobs in Joburg. Imagine being that bureaucrat, but your instructions come from politicians that keep changing. Our view is that, you see, government, there's a difference between government and administration, right? Government is about lawmaking. So you have to tell me what new laws Johannesburg wants to make versus Tshwane.
Yeah.
There is no answer to that around what are the local legislations, laws they need to make. Instead, these people have been consumed with how do you frustrate the bureaucrats so that you've got access to the resources. We genuinely believe this thing of provincial, even if you call it regional or local, that must just be an administration layer.
Not a political layer.
It's not a political layer. South Africa's laws are set at a national level.
Are you saying even mayors?
Even mayors
should be appointed by central government.
Absolutely.
Apply for the job.
You should apply for a job.
Yeah.
You've got a performance contract. You then need to tell your community, this is my performance contract. And when you call a city, people at the city town hall,
yes,
you then say, that is non-political.
It can even be an interview, a town hall interview.
Hello, this is what we said this town has to do. This is how I'm doing. These are my incentives. This is the bonus if I achieve this. This is how we are doing.
It's even easy to fire you.
It's easy to fire you. There's a performance contract. But the reason why none of the existing parties are going to go there, it is because these layers are a way of rewarding those who work into these organizations.
And those who have the constituency.
That who have the constituency.
Because constituency starts from the ground.
It starts from the ground.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the issue we have. And if you say, who goes up? A lot of people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So ideally, you want a person almost at self-actualization level to want to go into government, right? You have sorted your basics. You are not trying to put food on the table and all of that and whatever. But who do we have inside the ANC? We have people who are still to solve their basic needs. I was reading the papers about, Mr. Simon, they called him our perfect wedding guy, man.
Oh, Mama Wolo.
Yeah.
Yes, he's not. They asked for matric certificate.
They asked for matric certificate, right?
He says he has it, but he hasn't produced it.
But it was interesting what he said. He said, no, other than that, this is unfair please also note that I've got young children I need to look after. So, which is an interesting plea because we have people who they had not yet sorted their own lives
problems,
to even want to. So imagine someone who was loafing around Colgationing, then is able to form a constituency. That person is living in an RDP or whatever, right? They are then appointed a councillor or a mayor of a small township or village somewhere, right? They now control a budget of 100 million, right? That's now so far so good. Now, the nature of the democracy of the ANC is that anyone who comes in has got no security of tenure. They can't say to you, we know you are fine for the next 5 years. So this person is aware that they are quickly running out of time.
Or any minute.
Any minute
now.
Right?
Yes.
So South Africans are hoping that this person who does not know if next 3 months they are going to have money, because ANC does not have retirement packages. When you are out, you are out.
It's cold.
Now,
cold
we
outside.
want this person to look at this. This person has moved their kids to a private school. They've bought a house. By the way, same with the EFF guys who are then required to buy buggies and all of that. But this person has got no security of tenure. Now, this is why I'm saying all human beings are driven by self-interest. I don't know if any of us would do better than the type of the ANC person that is in power today.
Are you saying we complain, yet we are likely to do the same?
We're likely to do the same. Because you look at this thing and say, because essentially what we are saying is this guy must manage this 100 million, continue to stay in an RDP house, and wait for his turn to be kicked out, and then be able to say to the kids and the family, hey, it was good when it lasted, let's go back to the shack. I don't know what type of human being will be able to do that.
To sit on 100 million.
So
when he needs it at home.
Definitely. So if you look at the mature democracies are often, the senior roles are played by people who have achieved some level of success somewhere. I mean, Obama was a lecturer and doing other things or whatever. Even if Obama is out of government, Obama still has a life. The problem we have is we have leaders who they were nowhere before government and they have nowhere to go after government. So the fact that they are saying, I'm going to loot to create my own pension fund, I think that's likely how an average human being, will behave.
However, that some would say that you are discriminating against people with skills who just don't have the luck. Their lives haven't been successful.
Absolutely.
However, they have the skills and the talent to do the job itself.
Absolutely.
So some would say, but why ubakwala kuntle?
Because the nature of the ANC again is democracy, is where are your numbers? Typically, the people with the skills have not had the time. You see, building a constituency is a full-time job.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes, I know that.
So we have this disconnect where those with skills
do not have the time.
They don't have the time to build a constituency.
Yeah.
That's our problem.
Do you think our current president has a constituency?
I don't think he has the constituency, but he had the money to buy the constituency. You see, that's what I'm saying. That's the side effects of democracy. If you do not have the numbers,
because you didn't have the time to build
the numbers, then you need to have the resources.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not alleging anything. All I'm saying
you're describing permutations, possibilities.
Absolutely.
Yes. That if you were not studying,
absolutely,
and you were partying,
at
least show us something from the party.
Absolutely. So that's what happened. So Bradeza, to then start to pull this thing together. If you go and read the history of South Africa, 1652, all of those or whatever, if you want to understand how history played out the way it did, don't use moral lens.
Okay.
use the lens of interest groups. Who was interested in achieving what?
Let's because I've seen a video of yours where you tell the story.
Yes.
Let's use that
Yeah.
as a way of telling
the story.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with that.
Yeah.
So the history of South Africa does not start in 1652
Naturally.
with the arrival of the three ships, dromedaries, reindeer, and all.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. We all had to learn this rubbish in school,
it's
right?
cool. Interesting. One of my uncles
Yeah.
had a skorokoro buggy.
Yeah.
And we all called it dromedaries.
Absolutely.
we all from that story.
And that helped you with remembering whatever stuff you need to remember for your answers, But before that, history shows that there have been many dockings of ships in the Cape, largely the Portuguese. So the maritime history was largely dominated by the Portuguese. That's how you got to know of the Bartholomew Dias and all of this, Christopher Columbus. All of those are Portuguese.
And that's how Mozambique gets
infiltrated, right? What makes South Africa interesting, right, is not because there was anything of interest in South Africa. It was because Europe was looking for a path to the east, largely China and India, where they believed there were a lot of minerals, then there was the spice and all of that and whatever. There was no easy road to get to the east, all right? Then the countries that dominated maritime history had to then find a way of coming around to the bottom of Africa in order to get there, right? So that's why you hear about the Cape as a refreshment center.
It was a garage.
No, absolutely.
Where we go and get pie and walk around and then go back.
Absolutely. Where there are a lot of lies about how this whole thing played out is it is made up as if there was no refreshment center there. There had been many ships that had stopped. History shows that, archaeological discovery shows they stopped there. And they were being run by the locals, which were mainly the Khoi people of South Africa, right? The thing about 1652 is there was nothing special about these three ships coming up. I know sometimes it's caricatured as if the locals were surprised. What is that? What is this thing that's coming? Ships had stopped there so many times, some of them for as long as 9 months. Because people were seasick, there was a part that was broken and rude. They have to wait for it.
Diseases.
From the diseases and all of that. Yeah. So there was nothing special about it. The only thing that was different is that the people inside this ship knew they were coming to stay permanently.
Okay.
Right? It was Jan van Beek, let's call it about 91 people. 91 people, about 8 or 9 of which were women.
Okay.
Already that's interesting because it creates a very interesting
dynamic.
Dynamic, right? And again, people are driven by interest. The interest of the Dutch was to control a very important point on the route to the east. It was not we love South Africa and all of that and whatever. So then over time, those people, they start to flex their muscles, tensions with the locals and all of that. They are joined by many other people, including the Huguenots, who were the Protestants, who were running away from France under persecution by the Catholic Church there. So the very Calvinist religious aspects of the culture of the Cape over time was brought in by these people who came from the French. And that's why you have surnames like Van der Merwes and Stellenbosch and all of this. Those have got very French origins to it.
Okay.
So at the same time, these people then, the Dutch are controlling this thing, but the British is also interested in controlling this.
Yeah.
And over time, to cut the long story, again, the British, for their own interest, the British takes over the Cape. And once the British take over the Cape, over time, Britain abolishes slavery. And then they communicate with all the colonies, including the Cape, to say, you need to abolish slavery. Interestingly, That's what leads to the Great Trek.
Mm.
So when you hear that the Afrikaners were so driven by self-determination and wanting to define themselves and all of that, I'm not saying that's entirely false, but the big component of that is in 1835, around 1835, the British insisted on the abolishment of slavery in the Cape, and the Dutch, who have then started to form themselves as Afrikaners. Whenever people say, I want to preserve an Afrikaner's culture because I don't want assimilation, it's a bit of ironic, because what we call Afrikaans is an assimilation outcome. There's no one who left anywhere as an Afrikaner.
No.
And in fact, Afrikaner literally means African.
Yes,
to start
it
with.
was formed here.
It was formed there.
Yeah.
So assimilation actually created the thing. But they were unhappy with end of slavery. They then said, we have the guns, because the guns have been a big player. We can go more inland and then try and find our own slaves outside the control of the British in the Cape. That was in their self-interest. Interestingly, we call Afrikaners largely the Boers or the farmers. It is important to also note that they did not get here as farmers. Farming was being done by natives and locals, right? South Africa is actually quite a difficult country to do farming in. So all the later farmers were taught the skills of farming in a country like South Africa by the locals. Now, then much of the history is known, go inland. Then later on, the fights between the Afrikaners and the British.
Yeah.
I want to skip some of the things, like there's the war with the Zulus and all of that. But in the process, a lot of land exchanged hands. This is why part of the reason why the land question is so difficult yet so important. Much of what we call South Africa today has got a lot of land that belongs to Lesotho, that belongs to Swaziland, because as the trackers and the British go more and more inland, if you take a country like Lesotho, they then went and consolidated among the mountains. That does not mean the mountain was their only territory. So there's a big part of South Africa.
That was part of Lesotho.
That part of Lesotho.
Yeah.
At some point, there was a claim by...
I think it's still active, that claim.
So it's difficult. This is very complex and all. So we get to 1910. 1910 was essentially two white groups realizing that they are better together, right? Then you hear about the formation of the early organization that becomes the ANC in 1912. That organization was not trying to fight a liberation movement. They were trying to say, these were the educated people who were saying, we understand why you might exclude the masses, but we qualify as informed, educated citizens. Can you at least include us? And this is why they spend a lot of time going to the Queen and pleading their case and all of that. So self-interest brought the Afrikaners and the British together against who? Against the locals. How? The discovery of diamond in 1867 was a game changer. It coincides with something interesting. The Suez Canal is built between 1859 and 1869. So actually, if it was not for the discovery of diamonds,
that trip down would have stopped.
That trip down would have stopped being necessary.
They would have taken a shortcut.
It's weird how history works. Because you open the Suez Canal, which gives you the shortcut.
Yeah.
It is completed in 1969. But at that time, it just so happens that the discovery of diamonds happened.
Now you have a reason to go down.
Now you have a reason to come, right? And that brings all these people that we've come to learn of in history that dominated the diamonds and all of that, and whatever, Cecil Rhodes and all of that,
yes.
right? That pushes the Afrikaners further up the country and then the establishment of Transvaal and the Free
Free
State.
State and all of that.
And then after all of that, 1886 happens, and that becomes the discovery of the gold reef. Now, you need to draw a distinction between the discovery of gold. Black people have always known of gold. The reason why it became an industrial thing, it was the amount of gold of industrial, so that justifies industrial investment.
There's amount of gold that could be dug up.
Absolutely.
Versus what was being dug up.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But the quality of the ore, Bradeza, was not good. So what is the ore? So when you do mining, you go, you break stones and whatever, and you need to say, how much gold can I get out of these rocks? The quality of the ore in South Africa was not great. You need to dig up quite a lot in order to get a little gold. That meant the investment in capital, in machinery, it was difficult to be justified because you needed to extract gold at the lowest cost possible.
Of course.
So if you cannot invest in capital, where do you look?
Human.
People.
Yes.
And there are many of them.
And they are
roaming around.
And you control their movement.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the union was already agreed between the two partners that this group of natives are going to have to be the cheap labor we need. All right?
Which is why that labor was also imported from other countries, other African countries.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But the challenge you have is that sort of around, let's say, 1902, 1903, the labor is not coming.
Yeah, man.
The labor is not coming.
Where are these
people?
Yeah.
We know that they are there. They appoint a commission. This thing of commission is not new. They appoint a commission to say, can you go and help us? They call it the native question. You can search for it, the native question. Where are these people that are supposed to be here and all of that? So, of course, they go and find the people. They're like, hello, people, like, we have jobs for you. All right? You need to come. They're like, then the natives say, what do you mean? Like, no, I've got a job for you. What do you mean? No. I mean, you come with me. You go do some work for me. I'll pay you. And then once in a while, you come back. The natives say, what do you mean? Like, why would I do that? In fact, they asked them, why would I do that?
Yeah.
Why? Because the natives had learned to live off the land. They planted, they looked after the sheep, cattle, and all of that. So we take for granted that today we talk about jobs as if it's the most obvious thing. It never used to be obvious. People were like, I don't know what you mean. I'm here with my family.
I'm fine.
I am fine. Dry seasons, I know how to prepare for them and all of that. That what ultimately informs the Land Act of 1913, which leads to the dispossession of people. Why? We need to kill this source of independence so that it forces people to come and get jobs.
Yes.
They then even introduce ridiculous taxes. One of them was called a hard tax. So if you've got a mud, hard, fish, whatever, because people used everything they could get from nature, they're like, no, if we come back and you still have a heart, you don't have corrugated iron, all of that, you need to pay tax using money, which you don't have because your system does not use money. And then if you don't, you go to jail.
You're forced to work.
You're forced to work. They introduced dog tax. They introduced, the old lady tells me, my mom, she's 89. She says, they then said, you've got all of this cattle. And then they used to come and say, okay, we are going to put this cattle into, all of this stuff. We're going to inspect them. And then they'll open a mouth of a car. And then the old lady tells me there used to be something called a TC stamp.
Yeah, and they burn it and stamp it.
And if they put the TC stamp, that stamp literally means next time we come, if this cow is still alive, you are going to jail. So they decimated livestock.
Wow.
Took away the land. And then, of course, that's why today we have the conversation about the migrant workers.
Wait a minute. With the cattle that's been stamped, what you should either sell it or
kill it.
Or kill
No, you can't sell it because whoever you sell it to, it has the
it
stamp.
has a stamp.
The
Yeah.
TC
So
stamp.
it can't. It has a chassis number.
It must die.
Yeah.
It must
and you
die.
must eat it if
You have to eat it. So
basically you mustn't make money off it.
absolutely. Back in the days, the old people will tell you when the trucks came to say we are here to look for workers, people used to run up to the mountains. Right? Because they feared being forced. People were carrying guns and all of that. Because they're like, I don't want to go there. I don't know why. I need to go there. So, part of the thing I wanted to just share is also that the role of business. We tend to blame politics. But actually, in this arrangement, business was in cahoots.
I think it always is.
It has always been in cahoots for its own interest, right?
Yes.
Again, you'll see interest keep on coming up, right? Then, of course, that Union 1910, then we fast track to 1948. 1948 is interesting because it is immediately after the end of World War, right? Where Jan Smuts was part of the, of course, by the time Britain goes to war, Afrikaners who have a long memory of the Anglo-Boer War, they are fighting on the side of the British.
Right?
Right?
So they've ganged up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There were people who resisted that, including, you'll hear about Delaray, Delaray. Delaray was one of the people who were resisting this whole, union and all of that. There is still a story about how Delaray died, right? He was actually shot. They say the car did not stop when police tried to stop it, whatever. That's a different question altogether. Then the expectation was that Jan Smuts will easily, he's a hero, he's being celebrated, whatever. What they miscalculated is the work that was being done in the farms to lobby. So the surprise was that the conservative part of the Afrikaners who were not happy with this arrangement come to power through the support of the farming community. It was actually quite close. I think the difference was like 0.5% or whatever.
Okay.
And then it was the first coalition, if you want to talk about it that way. That changes the game for South Africa because that group was very clear about we are about
nationalism. African nationalism.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Affirmative action. You think you have had that just in times of the ANC? The first affirmative action program in South Africa was run by the Afrikaners. BEE, if you lose the B that says black, the first empowerment program was created by the Afrikaners.
How did it look like then?
It was the same. It was, we are in charge. These are the requirements in terms of how you play.
Yes.
And these are the people you need to partner with.
In charge from the British.
In charge from the British. Yes. And you set the tone for how do you play in South Africa, right? But then, of course, they didn't quite chase out the British because the British controlled what? Capital. So you then say to capital, I'll look after you, but this is my agenda. So a big part of the Africans' nationalism agenda was then still funded by big business and capital. But it was a surprise to business because they expected Jan Smuts' group to win.
Okay.
Why that matters is that in 94, they didn't make that mistake, right? So maybe before 94, in 1960, of course, the breakaway of Robert Sobukwe, the formation of the PAC and because he was unhappy with the Freedom Charter, this whole thing of belongs to all and all of that. Sharpeville happens, and Sharpeville, then people died there. But why that matters is the banning of the vocal,
the vocal black.
The vocal black, right? So that space is then occupied by who? Liberal whites. That's how the prominence of the people like Helen Suzman start to happen because blacks are discouraged from being vocal because the cost of that is death.
The black sash comes in
absolutely.
there.
The remaining ones then becomes the likes of Steve Biko and all of that who end up essentially being killed, including Steve Biko in 77.
And also the ANC being arrested and leaders of ANC being arrested. It's part of that
It's
era
part of that
silencing
era.
the darkies.
Absolutely. So today you will see that I always say I get frustrated when the NGO is complaining about textbooks in Limpopo, and then I'm like, why is it it's a white, white organization, white? And I'm saying I'm educated, I'm informed. So the white liberals occupied this space and continue to occupy this space today. I'm not saying they are doing anything wrong. They're doing what they need to do, but there has to be space. Black people have to start to come in so that next time someone challenges lack of textbooks in Limpopo, I'm not racial, but I would want that to also be some black people.
It's not AfriForum.
I don't want it to be AfriForum.
Yeah.
And this is partly one of the things we want to solve for as citizens. So that's why if you then follow you can always find the interest
groups. Yeah. What someone wanted from this.
Right?
Yeah.
The ANC comes into power, but by that time, corporate was prepared. The negotiations were facilitated by business. I think what placed the ANC in a tough corner was because in the late 80s, that's when the collapse of the Soviet Union happens. The collapse of the Soviet Union happens between 1989 and 1992. That used to be a big funder of the agenda. That actually leads to a reason why the ANC abandons
the armed struggle
and the socialist / communist talk.
Yeah, okay.
Because who's going to fund you when the poster child of
is no more
has collapsed?
Yeah.
So that's what leads to a lot of what we call sunset clauses and all of that.
What is the sunset clause?
The sunset clauses is, okay, what are the things that, we'll never, maybe we get to see details one day.
That's why I keep asking the question.
But generally what it means is that what are the arrangements that were put in place in order to sustain largely the arrangements with capital and largely the arrangement with the Afrikaners?
What is essentially, and correct me, what can we do to keep this thing the way it is?
Yes.
As much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not just about white and black, right? The issue of the Nkonyama Trust is part of the sunset clauses, right? Because what Buthelezi did very well, he delayed his participation in these arrangements as late as possible. The good thing about the last person negotiating is you can then set the terms because you are the piece that people are waiting for to complete this thing. That's why IFP had to be put in as a sticker on the ballot because Buthelezi just held on.
Yeah.
Right? Today, it plays out. Today, you would think South Africa has got one traditional king. You would think it's a Zulu king. Why? Right? We've got a Zulu king that is funded by government to a tune of millions ahead of any other traditional leader in South Africa. Why? Because when Buthelezi showed up at these negotiations, he said, these are my requirements if you want me to be part of this. Otherwise, leave us as KwaZulu.
We are fine.
We are fine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that's how many of this. So we must be careful that we talk about sunset clauses. We must not just think about them in terms of black or white, right? All of this are, I always say, our self-interests are represented by tribes. We are all members of tribes. The best way to understand race is to understand it just as one of the tribes. South Africa has got a big tribal issue that even if you took white out,
we still have to deal with ourselves.
We have not dealt with the issue.
Yeah,
I always find that Tsongas are always on the receiving end for some reason. There is a superiority-inferiority complex that happens between tribes. In South Africa, it has been easy to hide behind the white-black tribe. But I can tell you that even in some of the departments in provinces, they know that here, as soon as a vendor person comes in, the entire place must be vendor. Next person comes in, paid. The entire thing must be paid. We've got a massive, and again, it's interest groups. It's interest groups.
What do you say to some who say it was created, even when townships were formed, they were divided by race? It was created by the apartheid regime that said they lived too harmoniously together. Let us make sure that they're divided by race.
Oh, no, absolutely. That's a classical case of divide and conquer,
rule,
right? That's how it works. Is if these people had to come together,
they will win the war.
Interestingly, when people say I'm proud of my language and all of that, languages as we understand them today, it's a construct created by the white government. That project was given to what we now know as University of Cape Town in the early days to say we can't deal with these natives as a big mass. So how are we going to be able to separate them into groups and whatever? Then the university at the time says the one thing that we think can be used as a criteria is dialect. And that's how the languages got to be grouped. So a group today that you call Pedi, it also includes Kelobedu. I can tell you that Kelobedu is not anything close to Spedi.
Very different, yeah. They can hear each other.
We can hear each
but
other.
It's very different.
But it's very different.
I had someone that speaks Kelobedu here yesterday in the studio.
Yeah.
And I can hear the conversation very well. But I struggle to speak it.
Absolutely. But the group did to say, okay, we can manage this thing as a group. Again, in their self-interest. So you need to look at all of these things as self-interest.
It's an interesting story. Can a few elements of the story be reversed with the current South Africa that we have? Reversed to the benefit of all.
So this is why. So we are all members of tribes. Now, tribalism is the nature of human beings. Human beings like to be part of groups. I am here. I'm part of a tribe called parents. I'm also part of a tribe called black. I'm also part of a tribe called men.
Sundown's fans.
Maybe not. But you see, so
choose any other one.
Which hat do I bring out when?
Yeah.
I bring out the hat that represents my interest.
In the moment.
In the moment.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why when you hear people, and what do I use? I use propaganda. Propaganda is the self-serving narrative to preserve your interests. So when you hear someone saying, I built my own business, I believe fully in free economy, that is not wisdom. That is propaganda, right? That is you just using a narrative that serves your interests, right? And society is competition of narratives, and interest.
We seem to.
So to the question, the answer I wanted to say was, until we create new tribes that cross across our traditional tribes, and this is why in Citizens we said we want to build a professionals and maybe to an extent youth, which is future professionals as a tribe, because if that tribe can start to say what are the interests and all of that. Now, that clearly does not cover all of South Africa, but we think if we can engage the skilled base, people who have at least sorted out the basics in their lives, then maybe we have a chance.
Let's define a professional, because for me it's a very tricky audience.
Yeah.
Because you have to be clear who they are.
Absolutely.
Is it someone who has the education?
Yeah.
Or who has because we're dealing with something else in South Africa, which is you can have the education but not have the experience.
Absolutely.
You can have the education, not have the job.
Yeah.
You can have all of that.
Yeah.
How do you then define a professional in that context?
Yeah.
And remember, you said it's someone that has solved most of their life challenges, or at least know how to solve them.
At least the basics.
Or at least know how to solve them.
Absolutely.
So how do you define this audience?
Interestingly, Bradeza, is we actually did not even have to define it. So initially when we started with this project, right, we were talking about middle market and things like that, whatever. But when we started to talk to people and say, we are talking about this thing, are you middle market, right? People then said, but what do you mean? What is middle market, right? And then over time, we realize that people self-identify as professionals.
Okay, got you.
You see, then we realize that, oh, actually, we don't have to define you. You are
define
telling
yourselves.
us,
Yeah.
that you are professional. So we have never had to define. But what we know that in general, this group of people are the skills that the South Africa needs to be able to. We have just found a label that they self-define with.
We had a president in this country who called them clever blacks.
Yes.
Are they the same people?
Well, to an extent, maybe there's an overlap. I know there was, a lot of debates about the clever blacks. So the clever blacks, again, if you understand it in terms of interest, it was the ANC saying we don't want to be criticized, especially by a base we created ourselves. That's why I always say, my generation, our relationship with the ANC is a bit like, the uncle that funded your studies but abused you.
Yeah, or yeah, in the long run, he just took bad decisions.
Like, like you don't know, do you celebrate this uncle? Do you not? And all of that,
Yeah.
So the clever blacks thing comes from that. But I also think there is a part that I consider to be clever blacks away from the definition of the ANC. That clever blacks for me is the people who are oversimplifying the challenges that got us here, and they think the individual success they've achieved, it is about them.
And it's from their own effort.
It is from their own effort. They don't understand that until we create a system that makes an average person give them a shot at success, we have to be thinking humanity instead of human being. And those, I think, are the clever blacks. They have all the intelligent views around, there's a guy who talks about master morality and slave morality. Friedrich Nietzsche, right? Friedrich Nietzsche says, when you are successful and it is easy for you to argue for individualism because you actually don't need a group. You are a master, so your morality is based on master morality, right? But if you are at the bottom of this thing, of course, your source of power comes from the group. He called it slave morality, right? You will look to talk to others so that
you can both
absolutely
push a cause.
So when you talk to a person from this group versus this group and they want to sound like they are wise, in effect, all they are representing is their interest. So there's components of clever blacks. In the Fanon, the communist and socialist writing, they called it false consciousness. So at some point, you want a lot more people to be conscious, but actually you can also have false consciousness. People who come and say, I've seen the light, but actually, in reality, they are just looking to look after their individual interests and those of their masters.
There's a phrase that says, united in poverty, but divided in
Absolutely.
wealth. It speaks to that.
It speaks to that.
Yeah, that when we were poor, we were together.
It speaks to
that. Now you made it.
Absolutely.
You forgot all about us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you have another audience, a young audience.
Yeah.
Which essentially are your kids.
Yes.
They are the ones who went to better schools.
Yes.
But then again, there's a division within that audience.
Yeah.
Of the kid that never got the opportunity and the kid that got the opportunity. So how do you bring that person to be one, or do you deliberately say they are fine if they're separate?
Absolutely. The people who are making very big progress in becoming one in South Africa is actually young people.
Do you believe that?
Interestingly. So, and the extent to which they are adopting technology, whether it is through free Wi-Fi at the park that some of the provinces have done and all of that, the forming of communities is no longer about physically where you stay. These kids are forming their own communities that transcend. I'm not saying that places them in the same position, but I think we seriously undermine how much technology is going to create new forms of communities that do not depend on whether you stay in Soweto or in whatever. I'm not saying we should not solve for those partial issues, But these kids are becoming a lot close. I mean, think about multiracial schools, right? Again, it's a smaller community. But multiracial schools has forced, people who normally would never have spoken to each other to end up together at a parent meeting or whatever. The first night is awkward. Do I talk to him? Do I not talk to him? And all of that or whatever. So I'm very optimistic about the youth because I think they are going to get there as a generation, and both across white and black, they are talking about the unfairness of, we need to grow that community because that's what holds prospects for us.
I tend to look at it slightly differently, and it worries me a lot that in the youth in particular, there are some who are walking a similar journey that has to arrive at the same destination. The same destination when we were growing up, some kids were getting into a taxi going to a blazer to school. And we were staying in a township wearing tracksuits and jerseys. And yet the destination is the same. The destination is adulthood in the same country, going to the same shops and buying the same amount, the bread that costs the same.
Absolutely.
And I tend to worry about these kids that you say they might arrive together. I feel they'll arrive together, but they won't get along.
They probably
because
won't.
Their worlds are so different.
They probably won't. So one of the important schools in our history is Lovedale School in the Eastern Cape, right? That school is it's a missionary school. It's the school that produced Govan Beki, Chris Honey, Steve Biko spent some time there. And by the way, that school has also been used in tribal insinuation that says, the Xhosa, tribe has carried so much of South Africa. And by the way, the biggest contributor to all of this, let's call them the intellectuals that drove, the whole revolution movement and all of that. Largely came from that school. Largely from... That school was formed by a Scottish society. It was not even formed by, South Africa or whatever. Scottish society that says we are going to build a school where kids from all races are going to come and study here and they are going to live here. The reason why that became a perfect bet for politics was that these schools kids were in class together without any segregation, but their accommodation was separate. Right? Now, you are creating an interesting environment. Maths marks come out. Right? Who is at top of the list? David Mashabela.
Who is from some rural area.
Who's from some rural area. Now, you have been trying to retain some form of white superiority complex. But now the white child is looking and say, but David Mashabela is on stage. What's going on here?
He should be inferior.
He should be inferior. And this is part of the problem we are seeing in private schools today. If you go to the award evenings, there's a young black girl that's going up and down collecting all trophies. To convince that group of white young kids to say you are superior is going to be more difficult. Maintaining feelings of superiority and inferiority necessarily requires segregation.
That's true.
So anything that forces people together, you end up quickly realizing this is just another human being having the same fight I'm having, trying to make their odds work. They are driven by self-interest. I think it was Adam Smith who says, if you wake up and you've got bread, beer, and whatever, you do not owe a thanks to the butcher, the brewer, or the baker, because the fact that they are up selling you all of these things, it is out of their self-love and their self-interest.
You don't owe them a favor.
You don't owe them a favor. It is really out of their love. So you see all of... So these schools produced many of... What I was saying is technology. So we still have to deal issues with spatial planning and all of that.
Inequality at its core.
But technology is interesting that it does not follow this physical boundaries.
Mm.
I'm not saying it completely eliminates the impact. It cannot.
Because you're still dealing with a digital divide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That stuff we still have to deal.
Yeah.
But you're starting to see community forming, engagements, and all of that. We need to have more multiracial schools and things like that, you know? So...
But I'm curious to talk about the formation of this. Who picks up the phone of the citizens? Who picks up the phone and say, you know, we need to do this? You know, we don't always ask the question. Interesting, I was with Vuyo of the ATM.
Yeah.
And I asked that question. I said, when did you get formed?
Yes.
You know, and that almost led to the coincidence that went with Jacob Zuma's departure from government, and he immediately dismissed that. But I said, I'm still curious about your formation.
Yeah.
When somebody picks up the phone and say, Airborne, we need to meet, man, and do this. And then suddenly there's 2, and then there's 3, and suddenly there's 100.
Yeah.
What is your story in that regard?
So my story is simple, right? I'm looking at the dynamics of what's happening. I told you about the story of kids. I quickly realized that I have been trying to close myself in, but then I realized that now I can't keep the kids in this closed thing. So I'm not confused that it was out of my own self-interest that says, what system am I releasing the kids to?
Okay.
And then I said, no, hold on. This problem cannot just be a problem for me, surely. Let me look at my phone. And I'm like, 1, 2. Now, I was clear that I want a number below 20 because I did not want an initial conversation of 100 people. It becomes difficult to manage and all of that. So in reality, it was people I have known that I know are equally consumed by their own lives somewhere.
Okay.
And I was saying to them, guys, hello, we are looking for an upgrade on a Titanic as it is busy sinking. This does not make sense to me because when this thing sinks, there is no superior room.
No. Everybody goes down.
Everybody goes down.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? So then, of course, you get some drinks, buy some meat, and talk. The first few discussions were not even about politics. It was just really about what are we to do and all of that. We started to talk about, okay, but what can we do that does not require you to win the support of millions of people?
Why not?
No, because we figured that the infrastructure and the machinery you need to be able to get to millions of people necessarily requires a lot of money and necessarily becomes the beginning of state capture. Because whoever gives you the money, you need to ask for money. And again, I've spoken about the challenge of contributions to a good cause. So if you go down that path, you have already chosen, and this is why I'm sometimes often disappointed with the new parties that have formed, because you can't take the ANC on at their strength.
Which is?
Which is a massive national footprint embedded in communities running on the basis of T-shirts, food parcels, and grants.
And historic affiliation.
And historic affiliation. You cannot.
Get Kaiser Chiefs.
Get Kaiser Chiefs. Yes. If you do, you necessarily choose their methods. Why?
And are you saying their methods are wrong in this context?
No, I'm saying their methods are expensive. Elections in South Africa are very expensive. There's estimation that ANC spends more than 2 billion on elections. I don't know. This year is a bit different. I think there's funding issues. I don't see billboards and posters.
Well, I've seen a few.
A few. But
I even saw a deputy general secretary, because now they have something like that. Actually, they've always had a deputy general secretary handing over a wheelchair. Wheelchairs are not cheap.
No, listen. You must know that we are a few weeks to elections. Around at about this time, the billboards and the posters should be screaming ANC colors.
I must admit, I've seen the president.
You've seen a few.
I've seen the president.
You've seen
Maybe it's in my neighborhood.
I'm saying relative to what you would have seen before.
Yes, that's true.
So that type of politics requires a lot of money. Someone must fund it. All right? It has been said that if you are going to fight Mike Tyson, you don't fight Mike Tyson at his strength. Mike Tyson the theory is Mike Tyson never, he was not training for anything beyond round 3. Mike Tyson was, I'm coming in. This must be quick. So if you are going to fight Mike Tyson, and you try to take him on at his strength, then there are a whole lot of other implications and whatever. Or you can spend your time figuring ways of running around the ring.
Tire him.
And this is why I'm saying I get the temptation of trying to match the ANC. But necessarily you are choosing the cost of doing it that way
as well.
Yeah. That's necessarily what follows. That's why when party like Rise Mzansi started to have posters everywhere, I did not have to wait for the declarations at the IEC to know that there's going to be big money behind this. Because necessarily that type of politics requires big money.
Yeah. But if you truly want to change things,
yes,
and the current formation is in the ANC's hands,
yes,
and you want to change that,
yes,
how do you do it without the very money that, without the very route that ANC uses to get hold of these people?
No,
essentially, how do you steal people from their hands?
No, you can. But all I'm saying is necessarily understand that dictates that you must have big funders.
Okay.
And big funders are going to come with their requirements. That's why many of these new parties are very quiet on transformation. They don't have strong views on we are serious about there still needs to be affirmative action. And I think South Africa still needs affirmative action.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
BEE,
we are serious
like
about BEE, right?
Yeah.
BEE, we might have an issue with how it was implemented and all of that. Because I was listening to one of your conversations with the Arise guy, and he was talking about Elon Musk and whatever.
Yeah.
I see that's part of the problem of the clever blacks. I mean, I'm happy to debate him anytime.
Of course.
But he was using Starlink as an example, right? We need coverage, satellite coverage.
Yeah.
I get that. Now, he makes a joke about the fact that this guy was required to give away 30%
by the
whatever,
government,
right?
Yes.
All developmental states have got arrangements like that. In Dubai, you cannot go and invest in anything in Dubai that does not have 50% plus one local partner. Sometimes they call it a local handler because they are clear. So the issue is not that you're asking Starlink to give the entire shareholding of their business to a black person. What you are saying is, if you want to participate in South Africa, set up a vehicle here, a local vehicle with local ownership. Often this thing is presented as, do you want this multinational company to cut you out 30%? I don't know where people get that.
What has played out that has led us here? You're saying you have a problem with how it was implemented.
Yeah.
Because you describe it as something that doesn't seem like a crazy idea.
No,
but how has it been implemented?
It's not a crazy idea. Remember, again, BEE was not brought up by politicians.
Yeah.
Many people remember Nail. The first empowerment deal was done before the legislation. Why? Because the capital wanted to create a buffer. So it's hard to manage people's aspirations if you don't start to show people who are like them who are successful.
Okay.
You need to say, here are the role models. So it is doable. The fact that it might not be doable, it does not matter, because all you need to show is someone has been able to do it. So business came up with BEE as a way of rewarding those in power for their understanding, essentially. And the ANC was rewarded handsomely for that. At some point, you had Mandela opening another donated school pretty much every week and all of that. But that came with a lot of concessions. One of the things I always say is corporate tax was 50% in 1990, today is about 28%. There has been these consistent concessions, right? And initially, because politics were playing ball, corporates was rewarding. And that's why you saw the growth of the middle class with corporate opening up
True.
and creating jobs.
Mhm.
When the fallout started to happen in this romance, corporates started to keep the funds.
When did it happen?
I
In
would
your
argue
observation?
it started to happen as the ANC started to become more and more democratic, with people starting to talk more what people call populist rhetoric, or land question, independence of the Reserve Bank, and all of that, and whatever.
Nationalization of the banks.
Nationalization of the banks and all of that.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, that's not the language that we sign up for.
Mm.
And capital has got the ability to make you look good and to make you look bad because they control the purse. So you start to see the end of this romance, and part of what we are dealing with is the end of that romance.
Jeez.
So those are the dynamics at play.
And you as do you consider yourself, are you participating in the next elections? Let me ask that.
We are actually participating in the next elections.
Okay.
So we are going to be participating.
So your list is somewhere.
The list is somewhere. It got published.
Okay.
It's out there. We are participating at a national level.
And how many members? Going back to that question here, the phone call.
Yes.
Gents, let's come together.
Yes.
How many members do you speak of now?
We actually don't do membership,
Okay.
right? So the idea was, if you are a professional and you care about these outcomes, and I'll talk to the 7 priorities, you care
We'll
about
do it
these
almost
outcomes.
immediately, yeah, so we don't forget this.
If you buy into this story, we are actually not trying to stop you from being an ANC member or DA member or whatever. We are saying do this for South Africa. So we are actually a non-membership movement. Now the question is, if you are going, so we are not in the provincial layer,
Okay.
because we cannot, that's a contradiction. You can't go and participate in a layer that you say is unnecessary. Pick your battle.
Yes.
So we are not there.
You're in a national layer.
The
obviously.
idea is, okay, the question then will be, do you think you've got the numbers that, no, we don't. We don't think we do, right? But one of the reasons we said we must participate is there is this narrative in South Africa that if you did not grow up in a student movement and you were not, it's like some interesting exclusionary, you do not qualify thing.
And we were in school at that time.
Absolutely.
We were there. And we couldn't all be student
We couldn't be,
activists.
absolutely.
It wasn't possible.
So there is this subconscious thing that says, if you missed it, if you didn't do this at school, because someone says, I started this, I was still breastfeeding at the time then, but I was already very vocal and radical, and then you're sitting there at Bradeza and you're like, hey man, I missed this thing.
Yeah, I should have.
And now I can't, because I can't go back to breastfeeding, So part of why we need to participate, no matter what the numbers play out to be, we need to continue to say any South Africa can come and make a difference.
Even if they are with other parties.
Even if you're with other parties, even if you are not in the student movement and whatever, right? Are we likely to get a beating? Yes, but that's fine.
Wait a minute. Do you know the numbers? I've spent some time looking at the numbers and how you get the numbers.
Yeah.
Mine is not an actual scientist analysis. It's merely an observation, and a very basic observation.
Yeah.
That says if ANC got over 250, give or take, seats, 57% in the last elections, and they got it with 10 million votes.
Yeah.
With a population of 37 million registered voters.
Yeah.
They got, give or take, 20%.
20%. Under 30%.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And you look at it and say, really the work that needs to happen is to get registered voters to vote.
Yes.
That is the real work.
Absolutely.
That is the real work.
Absolutely.
Because once their consciousness is clear about the importance of their one vote,
absolutely,
they realize what change they could effect.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I said, the second party is the DA.
Yeah.
That got 80-something seats.
Yeah.
With 3.6 million votes.
Yeah.
And this is top of my mind. I could be wrong by margin.
Yeah.
And I realized that official opposition with 3.6 million votes In reality, that's not a lot of numbers in relation to the total population of registered voters.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now let's move straight from the top and go all the way down
Yes,
to those that got one seat.
yes,
They needed 30,000, 34,000
absolutely,
votes
absolutely.
to get one seat in parliament.
Yeah.
76, I think ACDP or something, 76 votes, 76,000 votes. I said, but that's not a lot of people.
No, it's definitely not a lot of people, Bradeza, but you need to understand, this is why you need to understand tribes. Right?
Yes, it
If you
speaks to
think
that.
about the small parties that got those numbers, they had some form of a tribe
beforehand.
In ACDP, that was maybe along the Mishwe religious, right? In ATM's case, I listened to the conversation. 2 seats, it was around church.
True.
And all of that. So you see these formations, and then you have some exceptions like Holomisa, who you can argue that was taking a chunk of membership of Transkei with him out of the ANC.
Yeah.
So,
but he kept on losing numbers every
So what
election.
has been a challenge is new parties that do not start with an established tribe. Those have struggled.
Example?
And now I'm saying we've got Ahang to talk about. PA, we talk about Mackenzie and them now today. But actually, Mackenzie, PA was a monumental mess the first time they
took part in elections.
Right? I think they got like 12,000. I don't know. I don't want to insult them, but it was like a low number. Why? They didn't come with an established constituency that says, no, we took you there, we'll put you there. And so that's part of the problem of starting a movement like Citizens, because you are defining a new tribe. That tribe has never been pulled together in a way that is required to do elections. So we know.
So even getting 37,000
absolutely
may look easy.
But it's actually hard when you're not coming with, I represent ZCC or whatever. Because if you come and say, I represent ZCC, that's already, that's already quite some numbers, right?
Have you worked out numbers at all? Because politics are a numbers game. Have you worked out numbers to try to see what is your potential?
So, interestingly, Bradeza, our focus has been different. We have not been spending time trying to work out how many votes you need for seat or whatever. It is important that as a posture, we are saying to an average South African, you can participate. Okay. So the IEC process solves that part. What are we obsessed about? We are obsessed about how do we build this base of 1 million people over a 10-year period who are informed, engaged, they are breadwinners, they have influence in their families. So if there is anything we obsess about every day is, for this year, we need to get that number to about 50,000. Next year, we need to ramp them up at another 100 or whatever. So you need to have exponential growth.
It's a long game.
It's a long game. That's really what we obsess about. I know the obsession has to be about the elections of 2019.
Because they're here.
Yeah,
2023.
But unfortunately, making a country work is not a fast food drive-through.
It's not McDonald's.
It's not McDonald's. We need to teach people. This is why we are obsessing about what Citizens is going to have to drive in between elections. But we want to inform people about choices. This is really where I want to go so that I can tell you about the ANC 65%.
Yes, you said they will make it.
Again, none of these parties, so all parties have got pros and cons. So if you start with the major parties, the 3 major parties, ANC has got their good things that they've done. They've lifted people out of poverty. Stats SA shows those numbers. You might be entitled, they're saying, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. The facts show that South Africans got better education level of literacy got better.
Access
average
to some
life,
of the basics.
access to all of that, whatever. So then you can say at some point wheels started to come off and we're dealing with the issues we have. So my point is there's pros and cons to each party. DA has done very well to represent the interest of its interest group, right? But for South Africa, I think they played a good role of being opposition in parliament by really taking the ANC to task. EFF has done very well in taking an average South African and get them interested in politics. Parliament started to be a thing, whether it was for entertainment or whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you look at the past 10 years of South African politics, you have to say at the center of that has been the EFF.
Yeah.
So the way we think, part of what we want, so we don't think we have got no 100% bashing against any party. All we are saying is, what does the South Africa has to solve for? To understand the dynamics of politics, I'm oversimplifying it. You need to look at two variables. One is, are you credible in terms of govern? Can you govern?
Okay.
Are you considered to have the skills to govern? The other is, do you have the policies that deal the big developmental issues of South Africa? At the center of that is something like transformation. So it's either you are good, you've got the policies, or you don't. And you've got the credibility to govern, you don't have the credibility to govern, or you do. If you start to draw that, you're going to have groups, 4 quadrants. You're going to have 4 quadrants. Let's start with the quadrant of parties that have got governance credibility, perceived governance credibility, but actually they don't want to tackle the issues that need to be tackled. Transformation, uplifting much of society. They think in America, they talk about trickle-down economics. They're saying, let's leave things as they are. If we grow the economy, everything will be
the
fine.
fruits will fall down.
Whether that growth comes from automation or AI, which will not create jobs and all of that. No, man, the fruits will come down. We call that group of parties housekeepers.
Do you want to talk about who those parties are?
Those parties, the anchor tenant in the housekeepers is clearly the DA. The DA is not, in our view, is not trying to seriously solve for transformation. They always say we don't need affirmative action, we don't need empowerment and all of that. And again, I've got nothing against these things used to anger me, but now they don't, because DA represents its interest groups. Its mandate is run the status quo as best as possible. Right? And that's why we call them housekeepers, because if you've got a housekeeper makes keeps the house clean and all of that, whatever. You are not going to get home and find the housekeeper saying we are adding another room here.
Or we even rearrange the furniture.
No. That's not the thing, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I see a lot of new parties could equally also be seen in that housekeeper space. I see Action SA in that space. Unfortunately, I see even a party like Rise Mzansi in that space. Housekeepers are funded. The funders also set the tone, and we call that the current elite. So these are the people who continue to generate wealth even under the difficult challenges. Now, these parties, you cannot push them hard enough and say, what's your views on affirmative action? They don't want to talk about that. It does not come clear in their proposals because their funders will not necessarily want them to do that. So we call that housekeepers.
Yeah.
Then you've got a block here where it's low on, so terrible on policy and terrible at governance.
Okay.
Now, we had this debate with the group around, is the ANC there? Now, the ANC has done this interesting job of ANC has the policy for everything. But when you've got the policy for everything, you might as well not have a policy.
Okay.
Because you don't have trade-offs. Life is trade-offs. You can't just say everyone can have everything they want, right? So the anchor tenant of we call this group the opportunists.
They are low on what?
They are low on policy. They are also low on the credibility and the skills to govern.
You cancel out their policies because they have too many policies.
Yes, you need to make trade-offs.
Yeah.
The leadership is the discipline to make trade-offs and say, this is what I stand for. You can't say I stand for everything. Because that way you just say, who gives me the highest incentives, and that's my friend.
Yes.
There is still debates. We have to see where entities like PA show up. Mackenzie is playing his cards close to his chest, but those are the opportunists. We say these are funded by gamblers. We call them gamblers. The gamblers are the people who say, I will throw something in, but I'm expecting a big payoff the other end. And again, I'm not insinuating that people who are funding the ANC are corrupt or whatever, but it's people who are willing to tolerate the risk because they don't quite know specifically. This is what this organization stands for, because it stands for everything.
However, you can defend and documents have on record the things the ANC stands for, and they're quite clear. Some will always say, even beginning from the Freedom Charter, it's clear. They're clear on the land issue.
Yeah.
Whether they applied or not, it's another debate.
No, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, but they're clear on a lot of things.
That's my point.
They're clear on affirmative action.
That's why
they're clear on.
But that's exactly my point, right?
But why do you give them a zero mark?
I'm saying I'm giving them a zero because in execution, in implementation, so policy is not just a document you put out. So we've been talking about NHI lately, right? They have passed a legislation that says NHI. People go to the budget expecting an allocation of money to start to do the NHI. There is no allocation. But meanwhile, you have done the legislation.
Got you.
So I can't say to you, you are serious about your policy if I don't see that congruence, the link between the things you say and the things you do.
Yeah.
So that's that block there.
Who else belongs there? Or do they entirely rule that one?
No, I think
I guess because they're in government.
They're in government, they can dish out patronage and all of that. That's why I'm saying there are parties that have kept their options open. I think MK is in that space, in the sense that MK is the game changer for this politics.
Absolutely. For this election.
So MK is ANC. That's why when people say, what are the policies of MK? I don't know what they mean, because MK is angry ANC members. And I'll come back.
So their policies are the same.
The policies are the same, right? They are just saying we will do better at implementing them, right? So we call that opportunists. Then we've got a block we call preachers. Preachers, they say the right things, but actually there's questions around, do they have the credibility and the skills to be able to implement this? Right?
Example?
In there, the anchor we see as the EFF, right? Say the right stuff, we will do this, all of that, whatever, but we still have to see that, it's interesting because lately they've been trying to explain away nationalization. Initially, nationalization was we're going to be a major shareholder in the key sectors, including banking and mining and all of that. Now, lately, even though that is still in their manifesto and in their founding documents and all of that, the other day, the commander-in-chief was saying we never meant that when we said nationalization. We said we will set up a bank. We never said we are going to take over anything in the existing bank. Unfortunately, these things exist pretty much everywhere in different speeches and all of that. I think if they wanted to change their position, they could have easily said, this has been our position. We have now learned this, and we think a quicker path is for us to set up a bank instead of taking over this and whatever. So saying the right things, we have to see that they are not fluid,
However, it's easy to put them in the preacher's space because they haven't truly governed.
Absolutely. And it's not because
they haven't had a chance to showcase their skill.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why these positions, Pradesa, are not deterministic, permanent positions.
You're not stuck in it.
No, you're not stuck in it.
Yeah.
ANC is arguing that they're doing a renewal, which suggests they have intentions of moving out of that and going elsewhere.
That's
Equally, true. EFF, we are not saying there'll be preachers forever. I'll come back to the point about similarities between EFF and DA. But they can move, right? But to complete the block, there's a block here we call the transformers. The transformers are the people who come with the credibility, the skills to be able to govern, but they are also clear that there are transformational policies we need to be serious about.
Okay.
And for us, it is not clear which parties today can do that. Part of the reason why that is the case is because politics in South Africa, in terms of how they are played, they are defined by the ANC, and there are no obvious funders for that bloc because it does not carry obvious interest for a funder. You are going to have to get ordinary citizens
to fund that.
Yeah. Then you are back where we started, where I said you need more people. We have lack trauma. We need to build a base over time and all of that. That's why a party that chooses to not take the money, chooses to build credibility, be serious. The reason why you need more informed, skilled people to talk transformation. It has been easy to caricature someone like Julius when he says something. But until you hear informed, educated, also joining that, I mean, Julius is clearly like, I really think one of our smartest politicians in terms of reading the room. There have been some issues like Springboks and all of that you got wrong, but, you can't downplay their role, but there has to be people who come with credibility, but also serious about the policies. So that's the gap. So if someone said, why citizens in the middle of all of these options? We are looking for more parties in that block that are serious about developmental policies, but come with the credibility, the skills, and all of that to be able to govern. Think about a merger between a mature EFF and a mature DA.
Yeah.
Then maybe we are starting to talk.
Is that where we get a kind of a similarity between the two parties?
No, actually the similarities are interesting. So the two parties, one, so I said human behavior is about self-interest, good versus evil, fear versus love. You can argue that the ANC is driven by love, right? Whether that love is the ANC loves everyone, The similarities between EFF and DA is both their politics are driven by fear. They are driven by creating an enemy out there, and that enemy needs to be destroyed so that, my interest group can win. And this is why, for example, we still call, how long have white people been here? I think we are at generation number 7 or 8 or whatever. We still insist on wanting to refer to them as settlers. Like, at what point do you become the citizen of a country?
Yes.
White monopoly capital, and also the politics of fear necessarily requires an enemy.
An enemy, yeah.
Right? And that's the same thing with the DA. So they are both fear organizations. You have to continue to talk about this big enemy. The second similarity is both, I think, have got a narrative or rhetoric crisis or a leadership crisis. Rhetoric crisis in this way. So what is the rhetoric of the EFF? Is capital has done this and all of that. In the beginning, it was easy to call it a white monopoly capital. But over the 30 years, there have been black people who have become capital and they have not been behaving any different. So the more black billionaires you have, the rhetoric of white is going to be diluted. You need a new story. I've already indicated that on nationalization, they've already started to change their tune. But also, part of their problem is as you prepare to govern, to solve what? To solve this perception of credibility and all of that. You can't be the party that is known for, I'm coming to destroy everything. Because people are like, no, hold on. So how am I going to give power to a person who's known for coming to destroy everything?
But EFF has said very clearly that they will not destroy anything.
Well, I'm talking perception, right? I'm talking policies,
perception,
right?
yes.
I'm going to take this. And then more and more black people are also starting to be landowners. And they're saying, oh, okay, but why? Look, why? So it is not, given the challenges we have and the EFS policies, why would they not be already winning 50% or 60%, right? Because I think people don't like the politics of fear. Fear is a difficult emotion to sustain for a long time. You need to keep on coming. This is how the Colosseum was built. First, it was a fight between people. Then the crowd is bought. Bring a fight between
a giant and
giant
a
and
small
whatever.
person, and then you bring an animal.
Then you bring an animal.
tiger.
Then you bring a crossbreed. You know. So the thing is, EFF can't stop creating the drama. And now they have not been able to create much drama for a very long time. The last one was they could have been in the State of the Nation. Even that opportunity was taken away. So they've got a narrative crisis, because how do you sustain that we are, this radical movement? The same thing with the DA. The DA is politics of fear. That's why even in their current campaign, they talk about rescue and save South Africa. The only party that can do that is the DA and all of that. That's nonsense. South Africa will be here and South Africa will be able to function. Those are the similarities. At leadership level, I told you that they've been built around personalities. It is interesting. I feel bad for poor John. So if you want to know how token appointment is also going into white territory.
Are you saying John is
an example of a token appointment? Because, think about it. We can all be clear on at what point did Tony Leon hand over to Helen Zille. But no one can tell me at what point Helen Zille handed over to John. No, so for
they have a collaboration.
Yeah, you call it collaboration. But this is what,
because one looks after the federal and the other one looks after the leadership.
Yeah. Sometimes announcements are made for the first time in an interview by Helen Zille, who's not the executive or the person responsible for the party. So those are the similarities. They might seem they are on polar ends, of course, but these parties are driven by fear. What we are trying to find is a middle ground. We're trying to find South Africans who understand that we've got a difficult history. There has to be trade-offs. There's pains we are going to have to go through. And then that's the issue we have, right? Now, I want to talk about why the ANC will go 65%.
I wanted to get there myself.
Now, I said to you that the game changer has been MK. Now, ANC in their last elections got 57%, let's call it. So, and the EFF got 10%. 10 plus 57 is 67, right? That's actually the two-thirds majority you need for anything.
Way more than
that, right? The reason why those two parties have not come together is essentially because the ANC looked at the EFF and say, no, we don't need you.
We are big enough.
Because we are big enough. To form government, we actually don't need you. There's been a lot of coverage around the ANC is going to drop below 48%. That is more a crisis. South Africa wants to talk about it as a crisis. It is not a crisis for the ANC. The ANC at 48% is still able to form government. It just has to find a small party.
It's a very short trip.
If another election they drop to 45, they are still happy. If another they drop to 40, they are still happy. Why? It's a short trip. So essentially the ANC knows that if things don't change too much, they change gradually, they still have another 3 cycles of elections before they have a problem. Now, if you are a looting person, 15 years is a long time, right? You're like, I'm not bothered.
I'm not leaving anytime soon.
The game changer has been the MK. Because if you go back to the history of breakaways and how they performed in the first election, Cope, you can go to UDM.
Cope, I think, was 5.
Just about
5 seats.
Just over 7%.
Yeah.
Right? And then EFF was about 5%, right?
They've seen a gradual growth.
They've seen 10%, right? But by the way, EFF will consider that a failure because I think EFF wanted to be a disruptor. They wanted to make the ANC so angry because they've been able to take such a big chunk and then ANC then can be forced to come and talk. That has not happened. So people may say EFF has been growing, but by measure of what was the goal in our view, they will feel they have failed. We have not forced these people to come and talk to us, right? Now, MK comes. Now, I know people are saying it's a KZN and all of that. I think they are downplaying what's going on. I expect MK to take out a minimum 15% in the elections.
That's big.
It's massive. I expect EFF to get to about 15%.
Okay.
And by the way, I think EFF, if things don't change, this will be the last time they grow that much. Because as I said, they are going to have to start to deal with a narrative crisis and a leadership crisis. More so because as they start to try to look like they are ready to govern, they are bringing people who don't have the numbers, like Vusi Zula and all of that.
Yeah.
They've got the skill.
Yeah.
That is causing chaos inside the EFF.
Because there are some that are saying, I've been here long.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but interestingly, if you are Julius and Floyd, you look at the ANC and the next layer of leadership. So, who comes after Paul? It is not clear. But if you say that is going to be the contest between something like Mbalula and a Lamola, and you are a Julius and you are an Floyd, you are like, if I was in that ring, these people, I will eat them alive. Right? So you're starting to look at this thing with envy. MK comes in. MK has been the biggest gift to EFF. Because what MK is going to do is going to take such a big chunk out of the ANC. We are starting to talk about the ANC that will be at 35%.
What?
Right?
Yeah.
So ANC at 35%.
So you're saying the 15 that goes to MK comes only from the ANC?
Well, it will come from other places.
But predominantly
it's going to come from the ANC.
Yeah.
So you've got ANC as 35%. You've got MK at 15%. You've got EFF
at 15.
Let's call this the RET group. The RET group. This is why people, when they say there's too many parties, I think people don't realize there's going to be a massive consolidation happening. Let's call this the RET group. It is at 30%.
Yeah.
The ANC is at 35%. The Moonshot Pact, let's give it 30%.
Yeah.
You add all of that, you get to 95%. The 5%
it's
citizens and
there's a smaller one
who are saying we are building a different whatever.
Vuyo's ambition of ATM is 200 seats, so that's more than 50%. That's 50%.
Yeah, well, like there's politicians, then there's politicians. The thing is, I'm not a politician. I'm not here to say we are going to get 200 seats.
Yeah.
I was at the signing of the pledge at the IEC.
A few days last
I've
week.
never seen so many presidents in one room because everyone who came on stage was on the 29th of May. Please note that this is your president. I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. So if we are being real, so you're talking about 30% block Moonshot Pact, 30% block, let's call it RET Pact, right? Now, theoretically, these two 30% can come together and form government without the ANC.
Yes.
That's unlikely.
The Moonshot Pact and the RET Pact. Even though I know Julius wouldn't want to be called the RET Pact, but you get
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. For the simplicity of labeling, they are so far apart that is unlikely.
Interesting. Helen Zela in the chat I had with her said they will never form a corporation.
Absolutely.
With
they
the
are just too far apart. It will be a mess. They will eat each other up. So that means the ANC is going to be part of government going forward for a slightly long time, right?
Is it likely for a ANC and a DA corporation?
Yes, I'll come to that. So the ANC is going to be the anchor tenant of government, even at 35%. The question now is it with the Moonshot Pact or is it with the RET force? Now that gets interesting. The leaders of the ANC, I think, will prefer the DA.
Of course.
Because if you choose the DA, then the path to power by the likes of Mbalula and others is not interfered with. Because if there was a contest between those people and John, then the contest...
It looks like an easy fight.
There's a bit of a non-contest, right? So even though the ANC and DA are seen to be apart by policy posture, the agents who are the people who are running the ANC today for their own self-interest, I think they will prefer the DA, right? Then that will lead to a lot of other compromises on policy and all of that. But unfortunately, for someone like a DA, that will be the death. I feel sorry for DA coming into these elections because if you go into partnership with the ANC, you are likely dead in a period. If you don't go into partnership with the ANC, you are also likely dead because there are a lot of other housekeeper parties that are looking more inclusive than the DA. So I think the anchor tenant of the Moonshot Pact in the future is likely going to be Action SA.
Okay.
Right? It's not going to be the DA. DA, for its own survival, needs to form a Moonshot Pact because they can say, in the interest of South Africa, we formed this thing.
But you seem to be questioning the size of the Moonshot Pact.
That
it's not big enough.
I put it at around 30% in total.
Yeah.
Right? If you bring in the thing about Action SA is going to take a big chunk. Action SA is a breakaway of DA.
True.
It's going to take a big chunk.
It's bringing back that.
But Mashaba has got an appeal in spaces where DA necessarily does not have appeal because he did a fairly decent job, I think, as a mayor to try to be more inclusive. There's a classical case of you needed bicycle lanes in Sandton versus doing something in Soweto. You also not believe how many people who were insourced under Mashaba that remain loyal because they think this man came and he brought us into the system. Today we've got these permanent jobs. We used to be under brokers and all of that. So 30%, 30%. Now, the thing that is likely going to happen, right, is that so the RET Pact, all right, is then going to say, okay, these are the people who actually never left the ANC voluntarily. You need to understand that. These people through and through are ANC people. They have been looking for bargaining power. With ANC at 35%, they have the bargaining power. And their story resonates with the masses inside the ANC. It does not have to resonate with the leaders. It needs to resonate with the masses.
Gotcha.
So now they are able to go as a block. The nice thing about this block is there is no competing interest between Zuma and Julius. Right? Zuma is not trying to go into government and be in the opposition benches. The old men just want to be left alone in peace and be looked after. Julius is the one with the aspirations. So the simple construct is going to be some leaders of the ANC are pushed out because they have failed the ANC. The 35% of the ANC comes together with the 30% of this block. And that's where the 65% comes from.
Jeez.
The requirements from this block is going to be leave the old man alone, stop dragging him to court, look after him. But we would like the commander-in-chief to be the deputy president of the country.
People question its effectiveness of that position.
Which one?
A deputy president.
Well, the deputy president, remember, it's actually a function of how much power that deputy president wants to take.
So you're saying the power is there.
The power is there.
But it's how much, and also it also has to do with how much power you're given.
Absolutely.
By your president.
So the president is going to be Paul Mashatile, then in this scenario, it's a scenario deputized by Julius. There is no tension there. It can start as the deputy president of the country, but then EFF can say we are back merging with the ANC, which means in the next elective conference of the ANC, you can have a Julius Mashatile pact contesting for president and deputy president of the ANC. Right? And that then, I call it ANC United. That is now the ANC United that is at 65%.
Is that, and let's go back to citizens with an E.
With the A.
With the E.
Yeah, with the city.
Deliberately.
Oh, with the E.
With the
Okay.
E. Does that work for the citizens of South Africa?
I don't
The
know.
scenario you painted.
I don't know what.
Because ultimately, all this, this conversation
Yes.
is about the man in the street.
I don't know what works mean. I've already said the man in the street is looking for their own interest. The
Which is
politicians,
the normal, easy life.
the politicians are looking for their own interest and
Yeah.
all of that. All we are saying is there a way we can align the interests of these different groups, right? And that is presented by, are there developmental / transformational policies, clear, coherent, can be executed, and do you create the credibility to be able to govern? This construct is not going to come up with much of that.
Yes.
There will be a push by the former EFF group that says, expropriation of land without compensation and all of that. Legislation may even be changed, but as to whether anything will change after that, I don't think anything is going to change. So, Bradeza, there is the path to expropriation without compensation is only real in theoretical. So think about it. You've got a piece of land, government wants it. We are under expropriation without compensation. Governments comes to you and say, we are
here to take
are here to take the land. The law will say, at a bare minimum, leave Mr. Mashabela at least in where he was
before you arrive.
You arrive.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That costs 50 million.
That costs 50 million. How is that not compensation? So
you're saying it's good on paper.
It's good on paper. It's good for rhetoric. But actually, it's going to start to have less people who buy into it. This is why one of our suggestions is that expropriation of land where it is required must be at cost.
Okay.
What did you pay for the land? And that is what the government is going to pay you for it.
But I paid for the land 1,000 years ago.
Absolutely. So the thing
then it was 2 rands a square meter.
Absolutely. Land is not supposed to be a speculative asset. You are not supposed to see land as I'm buying this thing because one day it will be worth. Land is supposed to be, we use the land to create value. Part of the problem is we have changed land into an investment asset and not the use. The use of the land.
Its true value is in the use, not in.
It has to be in the use because it is a limited resources, not only belonging to this generation, but to all future generations of South Africa. So if you imagine a South Africa that has got 200 million people, how is that going to work when everyone has to buy land at market value? The government, the state needs to continue to have the flexibility to say, we want to use this land for this purpose or other.
However, you must admit that as easy as that process seems, it won't be easy to apply.
No,
if I own land, my family, 3 generations past have owned this land.
Yeah.
And we believe it's worth R1 billion now.
Yes.
You walk in, you want it. It's the size of a township.
Yes.
You walk in, you want it. And you're saying, we will pay for it for the same amount you bought it for.
Absolutely.
I will say, I bought it for 1,000 rands.
You bought it for
in 1684.
You see, that's where the use comes in. This is where, you see, South Africa has to mature to be able to say, what do we want to use land for, right? And then that informs the planning, spatial planning. That also informs things like zoning. This is not an ambush.
No.
We are going to come to you and say, these are the plans by government on the use of this land, and it has to help us achieve these outcomes. You now have to use this land to help us achieve these outcomes over, let's call it the next, 20 years. So this is not an ambush. It's not a next year we want to come and find this.
It's not the Zimbabwean story we read of.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
And then I think what we then need to do, one of our proposals is if someone says, I don't want to do that, we propose introducing a land tax.
Okay.
A land tax says you are hogging an important shared resource. you are not using it to help us achieve the outcomes we would like to achieve. So it is going to cost you
to own it.
to own it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to cost you to own it. We are not forcing you to change it from a hiking spot into a farming whatever. If you don't, this land will be better used this way. So there's going to be additional taxes you pay because you are hogging a very important resource.
Got you. Makes sense.
There's no ambushing
Yeah,
or anything like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
You have, as citizens, you have clear points on crime, on how to deal with crime.
Yeah.
You're picking up on a few things that are key to South Africa.
Yeah.
Let's talk about crime. Let's use that.
So what we have done is we have identified what we consider to be 7 priorities for South Africa. But this is why we have not called it manifesto. And every time I hear about manifesto, I always say,
that's why I don't use the word
I like it when you speak Italian, Suddenly we are all on this Italian vibe,
Manifesto.
Yeah, So we said these are the things that we don't put ourselves at the center. And that's why even in a campaign engagement, there's no big face or whatever. In fact, if we had a poster, we'll have a poster where everyone can put their face on it. Because we want to say, it's you.
Yeah.
What are you doing where you are? This is absolutely has got nothing to do with Jan or whatever. So we have say, any government of South Africa, even if it is the 65%, these are the 7 priorities that South Africa has to solve. The first one is clearly crime and looting. Now, we replace looting. It used to be corruption. But as I've explained, we don't think what we are dealing with now should still be because it's corruption. We are dealing with looting. The ANC they say they are going through renewal. But I've shown you that because those people have got no other options, helping themselves is necessarily part of the system,
renewal. Yeah.
So they can't come out of it. They almost have to die before they are reborn. So we identified some of the key hotspots, the protection of the whistleblowers and the incentives. In some of the developed world, if you save a country $1 billion, they'll say we'll give you 5% of it. So, and then we are doing a terrible job. There's a lot of whistleblowers that have gone into hiding. So that's one of the examples. We suggest jail term for employment of illegal immigrants, because part of the problem that contributes to illegal immigrants, these people are given jobs, right? The party that has not been taken to task for contributing to this is the employers of the illegal immigrants. The usual things about the police force and their training. It's interesting that police go through this rigorous test and assessment before they join, but as soon as they join, all of that stops. And then there's
no continuous improvement.
60 kgs and all of that. We think we also have to reduce the prisoner benefits. Prisoner benefits in the sense that today in South Africa, an average South African is better off in jail than they are outside. They are better off in terms of food, accommodation, security, study opportunities, laptop, Wi-Fi, all of that.
Ask a double best.
Our incentives are misplaced.
Yes.
Our incentives are horribly misplaced. You cannot believe how many people who come out of jail, right? They are fathers and all of that. They come out, they face unemployment, they actually commit crime just so that they can go back, because once they are outside, their family says, we used to struggle because you were in jail. Now you're here. What's the plan? So we need to do some of those things. The next priority is social transformation. South Africa cannot run away from this need of transformation. Diversity, economic empowerment. We think there is an economic empowerment program that is very different to BEE, right? Because we think there has to be an empowerment program that benefits all South Africans, but by virtue of proportions, of course, it will benefit mostly Black people. Some of the things,
for example,
so let's take affirmative action, right? Or let's take the transformation of a business. The laws in South Africa today says this is the goal. Have this part black and mix of African, Indian, and all of that. Part of the problem with the current laws, they are essentially saying if you are running a business that is 100% black woman, you are a good company. You get the maximum points.
Yes.
That is not diversity.
Well, they're correcting the ills of the past.
No, but that's not how you correct the ills of the past. Because let's say South Africa overachieves on that measure, and we have 100% of companies that are 100% black women owned. Where is the story of diversity? Was the idea that we all come from different backgrounds and we can contribute. So for me, even in professional roles I've run, I've never tried to run 100% black team. Yes, did I make sure that it is mostly black and mostly made up of women? Of course I did. But there was still space for white citizens to play a role. So we need an empowerment thing that encourages this diversity, pushes for transformation in corporates. We have, black people have gone and studied 10 degrees and all of that, opened up legal practices. They are not getting briefed. Accountants are waiting, but all they can help with is Jan Moganwa's taxes because no one is giving them a job. It's crazy, and the DA comes and say, no, the measure of who we look after should be poverty. And I'm like, okay, so tell me how the poverty as criteria is going to change the mix of senior executives in corporate. Tell me.
Or small businesses.
Yeah. Tell me how that works. So this notion that you throw a line there and it is a specific thing, and then suddenly that's going to be what we rely on to change a very stubborn non-movement of corporates when it comes to transformation. So we have
So how do you change it then?
We have to set quotas.
Yeah.
You see, so we celebrated Springboks, right? But, Rassi, the coach goes and writes a book. He goes and say, guys, this is how I created the Springboks. He says, I came in, people were talking about quotas. They said they are struggling to find players that can meet the quotas. He asked them a simple question: where have you been looking? Right? Where have you been looking? If you're going to say we are running trials at St. John's and whatever,
it's only the St. John's.
Yeah. Someone said if you wanted to do a research on whether religion is good for you or not, you can't say I went to a local Catholic church on a Sunday to perform this research. What do you expect?
It's biased.
It's biased.
Yes.
So what did Rassi say? Rassi says, okay, I'm going to start looking where you have not been looking. And that's how he finds Sia. That's how he finds Mapimpi. That's how he finds Lucanyo M. Then he says, okay, boys, do you have the support structure around you? He says, no, you don't. Okay, I'm going to pull you out of this area where you don't have the support structure. He created an elite player program and he put them in there, give them the support, the dietitian, and all of that. Suddenly, we are talking about a winning diverse, right? So whenever people say, I'm recruiting, I can't find a black person, I'm like, you have to be kidding me. Most jobs in corporate are not rocket science. You can't tell me that you
can't find
a person. Where are you looking? Because if you ask me, I will give you immediately 10 suitable names. And that's the role I've been playing with many agencies. They call me and say, we want to offer you a job. And I say to them, I'm not interested in a job, but what are you looking for? They say, da, 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 da. I say to them, give me a day. I'm going to send
you someone.
I'm going to send you 10 names. We spoke about land.
Education.
Education. I want to just close this on social transformation.
Go ahead. Yeah.
We suggest that child grant and the 350 grant should be scrapped.
Okay.
This is why
very unpopular, but
very unpopular, because one of the things we want to entrench is accountability. So we are saying, by the way, the child grant is the primary source of household income for many households. The money is not going towards the child.
Well, yes, because the whole house
depends on that.
Absolutely, including the child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what we are saying is really simple. We think people who people are value dignity, and the idea that you must blame the unemployed is just downright ridiculous. So people want to improve their odds, right? So, but what we are saying is, get the unemployed, pay them a allowance of, let's say, 1,500. But that 1,500 requires you to do 60 hours a month of community work. So you are not going to just get this money for doing nothing. You are going to do something, be out there, engage with others, clean, whatever the community service is.
Can the economy afford a higher, because it's still a payment?
It's actually quite simple. So today we spend about 70 billion on child grant, and we spend about 35 billion on the 350 grand. That's already 105 billion. It is likely that this suggestion will cost more. I get that.
Yes.
But you already have a good 100 billion to work with. We are talking about how much is the difference that we need to top up. But why do we like this, Bradeza? Okay. The unemployed person who's got children, and children are made between two people, let's call it 3,000. Those people must then use some of that money to look after their children.
Okay.
But the lady who does not have a child can take that 1,500 and do something else with it. Today, the current arrangement, who does it place at a disadvantage in terms of getting an income?
It's the guy.
Is the lady without a child.
Okay, he gets nothing. And the guy.
He gets nothing.
Yeah, and the guy gets nothing. But remember, the money's for the child.
The money is for the child, but who are we kidding? The money is being spent by the parent.
By the household.
By the household.
Yeah.
So what happens to the household of the lady who has decided that I'm not in a position to have children?
She's getting 350.
That she's getting 350.
Yeah.
What is her sin? Her sin is she has not made children, right? Our incentives as society are so screwed up, right? So I want this lady without a child to invest in their own development.
I hear that in principle, but we can't forget that the real intention with that grant is not for the mother.
Absolutely.
We can't ignore
No,
that.
but that's why I'm saying I'm not taking it away so that there's zero income.
Yes.
I'm saying parents have got to take responsibilities for their children. You might not have a job, but we are going to solve that for you until you can find a job.
By giving you something to do,
yes,
that doesn't bring any income back to the kitty, the original kitty where that money comes from. Like in a business.
Yes.
If I hire you, you're coming to do something that is productive for the economy of the business, and the business will make money.
Absolutely.
We always make more money than we pay you.
Yeah.
From your hands.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, but if you come in and work and clean up a park, whatever it is,
yes,
and you get 1,500 rands a month,
yes,
and it brings nothing back. Really,
yes.
You're paying tax like anybody else. You're paying VAT.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
But there's no real income that comes from the resource we're getting from you.
No, absolutely.
Then that means the expense is getting high,
yes,
but the income is not increasing.
The income, remember, this is all social relief. Right?
I'm aware.
So that does not change that.
I'm
right?
aware, but you're increasing the social relief.
You are increasing the social
budget.
Remember that conversation about should it be increased? That conversation is already happening.
It's already there.
Are you at what poverty line, higher poverty line, and all of that?
Yes.
All we are saying is instead of that just being an unconditional handout.
Okay, you must do something for
it. You must do something. But also don't penalize a person who has decided to not add responsibility in their life.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I guess where I'm stuck slightly is that it's already too high.
Yes.
For the economy to handle it.
Yes.
At 350, at 1,000, 1,500, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting, let's increase it, but give you something to do.
Let's give you something to do.
I'm saying, why don't you just give me something to do and keep it the way it is, as a question?
No, because that's what I'm saying. If I keep it the way it is, right, then how it penalizes. So because I'm giving this to the people with children, I'm penalizing the person without children, right? And if I say I'm giving to everyone, including the people without children, I'm saying that does not help in creating dignity, self-worth. I am earning my money, because I think a lot of people are not looking for handouts. I think people are looking for, dignity. Have I worked for this and all of that? And we need to create that culture and also create a culture of accountability.
How do you solve economic reform? Because at the heart of it, at the heart of the poverty that requires the 350, is basic economics.
Absolutely. So, I mean, what are the key aspects that are in the economic reform space? The obvious one, interestingly, we have not been spending a lot of time talking about load shedding, even though it is supposed to be topical, because load shedding is a creation of the current people who are governing. The solution is not complex. We have fossil sources of energy need to carry us through. At the same time, we are creating renewables, and the cost of renewables has to decrease over time, right? But we have to get to a point where we say, what are the energy requirements for society, which will inform how long we go through the transition.
That's it.
This thing of committing to we will transition next year.
Because everyone is transitioning.
You know, I know people will say the numbers are wrong, but we closed Komati at the time when it was giving us 1,000 megawatts in the middle of load shedding.
So there was something coming from it. It shouldn't have been closed.
No, there was something coming from it.
Yeah. Even if it may have been less than its full potential.
Absolutely. 1,000 megawatts is about one stage of load shedding. Right? Yes, people will say it had aged and whatever. You know, one of the things De Ruyter says, he says the funders, it is in many of the interviews, people can find it. He says the people who are going to fund this decommissioning of this power station were so concerned that South Africa was going to try to reopen it. They said, don't just close it. Destroy it so much that it will be highly expensive to try and reopen it.
Wow. So it's a created
crisis thing, so that's a leadership issue. The thing I'm really worried about is water infrastructure. I think South Africa, I mean, if you think about Dubai, Israel, and all of that, those are dry areas. They get their water almost entirely from desalination of seawater. It is crazy that South Africa is surrounded by water pretty much all around, but we still have, the next big crisis, and in fact, the immediate crisis is water. And, at the time when Cape Town was talking about day zero and all of that, I was in a bank. We were worried about how do we move water. We were at some point even considering using the CAT, the cars that transport money. We were thinking about how do we use those to take money to hospitals and all of that.
Take water to hospitals.
Absolutely. Because water is there's a lot of things you can live without.
But
you can go without food for something like 30 days or whatever. That's why people fast for 30 days. It's voluntary hunger. That, but you can go for it. Water, it's about 3 to 4 days before you die. So that's a major crisis that's coming. So we think there has to be conversation about that. We think there has to be some reprieve on small businesses. You can even include incentives like, no payment, no tax to businesses up to a profit of 5 million to start to get the economy going. We spoke about transformation. And then we need to create jobs. Now, creation of jobs is done by the economy, but in reality, the South African government can also create a lot of jobs to replace spaces where they today use tenders. There has to be essential services that is being done by the basic state capacity. You cannot be using a tender to buy tissue paper or a broom and all of that.
Their basic needs and continuous needs.
So we cover quite a lot of that. And then the next priority is education, the usual stuff. Education has to be free up to a particular level. We think the first degree level on NQF level 7. But we think there's also an opportunity to, today, if you are saying I'm learning programming on my own online, you don't qualify for NSFAS. No, you can't say I'm learning whatever or I'm doing gaming or whatever, right? So the net for funding of students has to be a lot more broader, and it has to include the new knowledge courses that the young people are going into.
What does it say about who gets similar to the social grant?
No, it's free to everyone.
To everyone, irrespective of who you are.
Absolutely. We have to get to a point where we decide education is so essential. And this is why when we talk about the economy, people always talk about privatization, state, or whatever. The idea of a developmental state is quite simple. This is why when you say to people, classify China, is it communist, is it capital? It's not easy. It has been called state capitalism.
Yes.
Why? Because China says, this is our goals.
The state will make money.
We are going to do this. We are going to invite businesses. Some of them are the businesses we created. Some of them are coming from whatever. But in terms of how they play, this is how we play, because we have our own developmental goals. In South Africa, anything goes. You know, you take AI. People are talking about AI this, AI this. Do you know that mature countries are saying this AI is going to cause so much disruption, including on jobs? We have to start to think about universal income or basic income, because people will be out of jobs. We also have to think about how do we tax the businesses that are highly automated, because those businesses are not contributing
because there are no workers that are earning money, that money ends up in the economy.
That's what mature countries do. Here, bring anything. Does it destroy job? Does it not? And all of that. But to come back to the point of education, one of the things we are saying is, we spoke about languages earlier. We don't think there are 9 or 10 official languages. There's really 2 official languages, English and Afrikaans. Read our legislation, read court papers, read government gazette, English and Afrikaans. And they got stuck there as a remnant of the political past we come from. Now, if you think about it, a lot of Black people and kids died in 1976 resisting Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. Today, you and I are teaching our kids Afrikaans voluntarily within our homes. But it is not because we chose Afrikaans. It's because we chose a school close to us. But when you go to a school close to us, the requirements is the child has to do a minimum of 2 languages, and that school happens to offer this
English and Afrikaans.
English and Afrikaans. We are saying English is almost a pain we share with the rest of the world. The EFF media statements are in English. The manifesto launches are in English. We can deny it all we like, but we must make peace that we have inherited English. It is our language of business and education, medium of instruction, especially from high school going upwards. And a child can do one academic language, and that's English, is the pain we share. Does it mean not investing in our other languages? We can create another education layer called cultural education, where parents can choose that I still want my child to go and learn this. If you think about what has preserved Afrikaans, it has been non-government organizations that have said we are going to invest. One of them is called AKTV or something like Afrikaans Kultuur en Taal something. I've forgotten the acronym. They are obsessed with preserving the language and all of that. I really think it is crazy that in 2024, I should be, in the middle of the night trying to teach my child Afrikaans for a language that does not even help them as part of a global citizen, but just because we inherited it as part of the history of our society.
But what do you say, though, to the loss of of our own mother tongue in an academic environment, in a schooling environment, if you're saying, let us open the door wider for English and Afrikaans for that matter, because once you do that, at some point you will lose. You will close the doors and make it smaller for your own language.
Absolutely.
Which is Sepedi and so forth.
Hence I'm saying, and Kilobedu, by the way, the Kilobedu people, academic program forces them to do Sepedi, which is not even their language.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we already have this challenge where we must say, how do we invest in culture and languages? I don't think the school environment should be where we solve it, especially given the backlog, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen, sometimes I go on government websites, I see the desperate attempt at translating, like curriculum. What is curriculum in Sepedi?
I don't know.
It is called curriculum.
But there's an extensive research in understanding, particularly in the mathematics. And I've had a conversation with Professor Pakeng about this particular subject, where she speaks about your understanding of your own mother tongue. Simplifies your understanding of other things.
Oh, no, absolutely. That's why we are not even suggesting tampering with early childhood development. But we are saying by the time kids get to high school, you see, the more we have African schools, these schools, whatever, by the way, this also become exclusionary, right? So that means if I'm not fluent in a particular language, I already start at a disadvantage. That's why I'm saying English is the pain we share, right?
Yeah.
Then the investment.
But we don't have to continue carrying.
We don't have to continue. It does not have to be into perpetuity, but it's the pain we share with the rest of the world.
Of the world.
When you Google on the internet, you Google in English. When you do, do you know that there's the vernacular Google website?
No, yes, you can Google and translate into Zulu.
No, you can even just go and say, I want my Google to show in this language.
Yes.
And then you're going to have these challenges where curriculum becomes curriculum,
I hear that, okay?
But the point I wanted to make is that I'm not disputing that we need to invest in cultural stuff.
The same way as that Afrikaans example you made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Government has to support efforts towards preservation and further development of languages, and that language list will be a lot broader. I mean, I saw one of the people on social media who was saying, where is the Khoikhoi language in the official languages? We all seem to agree that they are the first people of this country.
It's even in our code of arms.
That happens to be, it's even in our code of arms.
Yeah.
It is not an official language. There's like that.
It's a travesty.
So we
it's
need
a crime.
to grapple with this thing of what does development of languages mean. But in the meantime, you can't have a language that gets the benefits of having been there by virtue of our political history, enjoying the benefit. That's really what the issue we have.
However, it's a decision that is made. In this very studio, we record a lot of multi-language programs of all sorts, whether it's radio and so forth. So I feel it's a decision that's made by those that are senior, that are above us, that are saying, bring it in English and let's move on.
Absolutely.
And let's not translate it because it costs money to translate.
One of the things we are going to challenge government on is if you are serious that these are all official languages, show us that you are ready to do these things in all official languages. And it will turn out that they don't. Singapore is used as an example of a small nation that got to transform themselves. They grappled with the same issue. And ultimately they said, you know what, we are going to have things we call, I think they call them national languages. They are not for academic or business purposes. We will still continue to invest in their growth. But English is going to be our business and academic language because that connects us with the rest of the world.
Okay.
That's how they manage it.
But we will spend time and effort on our own language.
People like using Singapore, but they don't like using it's like we like the outcomes.
But not the process.
We don't like the process.
Yeah.
So, and then of course there is one of the priorities we touch on is digital evolution. I don't want to spend too much time on it. In reality, there's a lot we need to digitize. We need to make it simpler. A car is not supposed to have a disc. At best, it must have a QR code. That QR code, you need to be able to scan it. You will say you have updated your stuff, or if you're not up, this thing sticking, unsticking, whatever. So there's a lot of things we can do there. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. Then the governance thing is a priority. Like I said to you, we buy the story about reduced ministries, and
you speak of effective government.
Effective government, reduce the layers of government. We don't need provincial layer. We also don't need the local government layer. We need the local administration layer, which is made up of professionals who have applied for a job. They have a performance contract. Do you know a lot of people who work in government? I mean, how do you attract skills? A lot of people for the past 3 to 5 years have never had an increase, have never had a bonus, but you still say you want to attract the best people to come. You have to be kidding. It's not going to happen. And then we think funding requirements, disclosures of party funding has to be extended to NGOs because, as we said earlier, we think NGOs are very political. We need to also get to a sense of where they get the funding. We also suggest some form of veto power that a president can have that deals with developmental projects. What we are trying to solve here is this thing of like shelling for gas, or bringing power, ships and whatever. That is stuck in all sorts of challenges, legal challenges.
But it may be open to abuse.
It may be open to abuse. That's why we say once the president has exercised their power, that must be taken to parliament for ratification by 2/3. You have to set the level high so that is not subject to abuse. But it also cannot be for everything.
Right, yeah. But then then the question is what do we put into that basket?
That's what
and
I'm
what
saying,
do we take out?
Absolutely. We need to come back. These are the developmental priorities. We need to secure energy. We need to create jobs. So largely it will be things that open up those spaces. South Africa has got, there's been discoveries of a lot of gas. The fact that it is stuck
underground.
And these are interest groups. They represent someone somewhere. So those are some of the issues. The last part is this thing of funding. The idea that, all of this are going to come. Yes, there's money.
Who are you funding in this?
No, I'm talking
case?
about the funding of state, additional sources of funding.
Okay.
We need to talk reparations. Where do we have South African money that lies elsewhere? We think the corporate tax in South Africa is low for a developmental state. So we suggest that tax should be at around 30% instead of the current 27%, 28%. That helps as part of the questions you were asking me about where is the money going to come from. We also think there has to be a new tax bracket in South Africa, not to increase personal tax, but in South Africa, we are starting to have more and more people who earn more than $1 million a month. I mean, you're starting to see numbers out there, 40 million, 100 million, 300 million.
CEOs and
we think that has to be
COOs.
taxed at a higher rate, not increase tax
for everyone.
But you need to introduce a tax bracket that says if you earn more than $1 million a month, you are going to pay about 50%. There's been, there's new property development opportunities. Many people will know that now a big part of Dubai is actually built into the sea. So actually, land is not as fixed as we think. So you can go and create
a new town into the sea. Into the sea.
There have been suggestions that why don't you change Robben Island to be
an estate,
a state or a party or an event or whatever.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
You can fix it, you can extend it. Imagine being able to bid for F1 race and you create a second shaped like Africa, the continent. You know, there's that hook in Ethiopia and that horn, and
yes.
you know, so you know, people will come there, events will come there, artists will come there. We need more tourist attractions, and these things are doable. There is money that is sitting with the PAC and Government Employee Pension Fund. By the way, one of the challenges we have is that today South African pensions can take as much as 45% of South Africans' pensions offshore
to explore opportunities.
Invest essentially in other countries.
Yeah.
Right? Those are
And
South
not
African pensions. You know, there's also a lot of money sitting in the Government Employee Pension Fund. Slightly technical thing, but Government Employee Pension, we are the underwriters as citizens. Whether that pension fund makes money, does not make money, it is called a defined benefit. When you work for government, it is already defined that you will get this much for this long when you go on retirement.
Okay.
Yours and mine is defined contribution.
Ah.
You contribute and you
Then
hope someone invest the money and make a return. You can easily route. That's why you hear that people have got less pension than they need.
Than they anticipated.
State employees don't have that problem, because theirs is a defined benefit. So we can take that money and use it for infrastructure development, because South Africans are the underwriters of that pension. You know, so those are some of the ideas.
Yeah.
To close it off, these are not the ideas that are going to resonate with the masses of South Africa with ease.
Except for the increase of grants.
You know, especially for the increase of grants. But we are after Bomoreki. You know, if we can get the breadwinners, the decision makers in families to help us shape this dream and future, using their skills largely, then over time, we will be able to change the country and build a better South Africa.
What kind of leadership do you think our country needs?
The debate has been autocratic versus democratic.
I don't even want to label
what
it.
we actually need is skilled leadership.
Yeah, I don't want to label it in the regular labels. Whatever
So the problem about South Africa is that politics play, some of the most stable countries with high levels of prosperity are the Scandinavian countries. Iceland, whatever, Denmark, all of those, whatever, because they've been able to use their natural resources to actually, they are wealthy countries, not because they are big. And in those countries, elections are never a big thing because there is a state machine that runs whether the current president, I mean, if you ask people who's the president of Iceland or Denmark or whatever, no one knows.
It's not top
no
of
one
mind.
cares.
Yeah.
In fact, even voter turnout is not that high, right? Because politics are a small part, which is about legislation. The obsession has been, how do you create the bureaucrat machine that functions? So I am less obsessed about who's the political leader. Political leaders will come and go. My obsession is, how do we create the state machine that outlives the political leaders?
But you have to agree that we've designed a politics that are on leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember I even asked Helen Zille about this question. I said, do South Africans vote for policies or vote for people?
Yeah.
The reality is they vote for people.
Yes.
As you said earlier, almost no one can tell you what are the policies of or manifesto of MK Party.
Yeah.
And you said, but the similarities from ANC.
Absolutely.
It can be obvious that answer. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
However, it is, because we know that the votes are not really going to come from policies.
Absolutely.
They're going to come from people saying, Jan is more popular.
Absolutely.
I like him.
Yeah.
I've had people saying, Mina Uzuma ngiyamthanda.
Yeah.
Angifuni ukwazi ukuthi bathi wenzeni.
Yeah.
When you hear people say that, you know that it has nothing to do with policies.
Yeah.
It's having to do with the person.
It has nothing to do with the policies. And by the way, I have not forgotten, I need to close out with who is my favorite politician.
We might as well
that will
close
be the
it
last
with that.
thing.
Let's close it with that.
But
while you're answering that question.
The you see, the idea of what we are doing with citizens is someone has framed it as we have to have more people who are willing to plant the tree, the shade of which they may never enjoy.
Mhm.
You see, so yes, it is true that that's the structure of politics today. But I'm saying you and I have got an opportunity to create a different type of politics. Yes, we are governed by what happens today, but part of the maturity of South Africa, as more people become more exposed, more aware, and we really think digital is playing a big role in changing that.
Mm.
A lot of people can check something. You know, they never used to. Today, you don't have to just rely on your local politician. You can check it and all of that. We really think over time we are going to create a society that's a bit more aware to be able to ask policy questions. Is that where we are today? No. And that's why for us, we said, are we going to wait until that happens? Or are we going to be part of agitating for that to happen?
Mm.
You know, and so therefore we are a lot more obsessed about what happens 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and not so much about what happens today in 2024.
Who's your favorite?
My favorite, you asked me in this block of the transformers,
Mhm.
you know, who's there? And
Do we have really a transformer?
there is a politician I like. I think the guy shows up, and again, I'm talking personalities. We need to have more people. I think clarity on policy and I think credibility doesn't get caught in emotions
Mm.
and all of that. And you recently had him here. If I had to choose a politician, Vusi Zula will be
Wow.
my favorite politician.
What is it about him that
I think so. The drama of South African politics in parliament, right, lends itself to emotion. I mean, at some point we had two, adults comparing each other's balls. This one said your balls are smaller, and
yeah, it tends to look very immature.
Zungula has been able to stay out of that. ATM, as a party, it pops up on some of the key issues. They push the Pala issue. So they might not be big in parliament, but the guy.
But you hear
me,
their voice.
You hear their voice.
Yeah.
The guy is quite sensible. There's an issue now with donation of cars. I hope he can stay out of the shortcuts that comes with the funding and all of those things. Stay clean. But I really have got very high respect for that. And he's clear on the need for transformation. So I think if I had to put a leader, I don't know about the party, if I had to put a leader in that potential future transformer box, probably Vusi Zula will be my man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if this platform where we had him played any role at all. Did you get a chance to watch it?
I watched that.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was the consistent guy. You took him
He's
to
very
task.
consistent. I did. I had
including on
to.
cars and all of that.
And how he got appointed.
Quite a
I
sense
questioned
of how
that.
they formed
How they
ATM.
because for me it was quite interesting. It was almost like they got together and say, "You're the guy."
Absolutely, and he showed that he actually does not even come from heavy
Politics. Yeah.
history. But I think we need more people. And by the way, there are other people that add value. I think, interestingly, someone like UDM, Bantu Holomisa.
Oh no, jeez.
The voice is coming. It might be 1.5 people, but you can hear.
Look at the speaker's issue. It's all it's all him.
He's challenging that.
It's all him.
I'm not saying let's get rid of everyone. I'm saying we need to start to have a mix.
Yeah.
And that's really where we want to contribute and start to bring, different types of people into the space. So our slogan is we can do better. And the idea is it starts with you wherever you are, that you can choose to make a difference. And as we say, if you think it's too much to do for you, at least do it for your children or your family.
I always do this with my political guests. I say, it's an election year. You've spent money and you continue to spend money on making sure that you get votes and you put in a lot of efforts.
Yeah.
Here's a camera. Speak to your voters.
South Africans, our message is simple. you can no longer say you are not interested in politics, because the consequences of politics stalk all of us home. As we have said at the pledge of the Code of Conduct at the IEC, at this point in time, it would seem that the skilled South Africans have relegated and delegated the complex job of building a better South Africa to the least skilled among us. You are the custodians of this democracy. You have to make a difference. The first goal for us is go out and participate in democracy, even if you don't choose to vote citizens. But all we are saying is, if you are looking for an alternative that comes with credibility, the skills and experience of handling a complex task we are facing, but they are also not pussyfooting around the idea of transformation and change in society that we need, then citizens may be the alternative that you should consider. We will be on the ballot. The reason we are on the ballot, we don't have the political history. We did not become radical and transformed at time of breastfeeding, but that is used to exclude many South Africans. You can participate, you can form an organization. It does not have to be a political party. But if you're looking for a voice that over time will build a base that will change the course of history, citizens is the alternative. We can do better.
Rewe, Osengang.
Thank you so much, Fradeza,
I wish you well.
for the opportunity.
Anytime. It's
Really
my pleasure.
appreciate it.
When I got the call, I said I have to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Because I see South African economy, South African politics in terms of target markets.
Yeah,
There's a market in me that continues to carry on, and I see those blocks.
absolutely.
And I always say we cannot even begin to fault our parents
Absolutely.
For being such staunch supporters of the ANC.
Yeah, we cannot.
Because they remember
Yeah.
their lives when they had to walk out of the house.
Absolutely.
And before they got to the gate, rather to the corner, they remember, I forgot my dompas.
Yeah.
And they had to rush back to fetch
Absolutely.
it because they knew the implication of that.
Absolutely.
They cannot forget when they were moved from where they used to live,
Yeah.
forcefully.
Yeah.
You used to live here. This was your home,
Yeah.
for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And suddenly some people came
Yeah.
and said, oh, on Svat land.
Yeah.
And tomorrow you didn't have a home anymore.
Yeah.
And you had to go, they moved you to whether get Soweto, get Tembisa or
Absolutely.
Kekai. They cannot forget that.
They cannot
Those people
forget
are
that.
still here.
Yes.
They are our parents.
Absolutely.
And as a result, we have to understand their vote.
We need to not only understand that, but as I said, I might not be my parents, but I know how I have benefited from the transition.
Absolutely, because they gave birth to you.
They gave birth to
and
me,
you came at the time.
And I came at the time
to benefit from their fight.
from their fight.
Yeah.
That's why I am not in the ANC bashing space.
You see,
But
because
I'm-
you are.
But I'm saying it's time for change.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And your kids
Yeah.
are saying, time,
Absolutely.
you're crazy.
Yeah.
Your ANC is nonsense.
Yeah.
Emagogo, your ANC is nonsense.
Absolutely.
We need to chart a new path.
Absolutely.
And because they have no historic
They have
connection
no historic
to
connection.
you, to
Absolutely.
your problems,
Absolutely.
or your solutions, or your luck,
Yes.
or your parents'
Absolutely.
misfortune.
Absolutely.
They have no.
But the reason we need to educate them
Mm.
is snake oil merchants like to go to history. The more people become less exposed, we might repeat the sins of the past.
Absolutely.
So
That's
we still
true.
need to teach the children to
Mm.
say, this is where we come from. This is how we got here. So that a black child does not start to have this hanging sense of inferiority. We must say, your forefathers did not have guns. They lost that battle.
Mhm.
But they are awesome people. This is what they achieved. This is what they did.
Yeah.
And when you hear someone making what sounds like sound logic, look at why they are saying that.
Mm.
It is in their interest. Over time, we need to create a different interest group. And that tribe should be a lot more about what does a future South Africa look
Mhm.
like. And it will require that we deal the difficult parts, which include transformation.
It's probably the interest groups that looks at the greater good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
for everyone.
For everyone.
That's
the challenge.
Yeah.
We try to sustain that with the win of the World Cup and all of that and whatever. It's not sustainable.
We need remember the corruption of the stadiums.
Absolutely. We need to create...
and it was some white-black corruption,
Absolutely. The biggest fraudster is, unfortunately, and may his soul rest in peace, we always have to respect the dead, is Marcus Euster, right? So this corruption has got no color. I don't want a black child to think it is about his people, but I also don't want a white child to think there are no opportunities. But by virtue of the proportion of society, wherever we look, it should be likely that we will see a black person playing a role. We have to have children looking up and seeing that it is doable. And that's why for me, and I've always said, I'm not worried about, do we find people who are fully competent today? Yeah, merit is important. But the lack of transformation is not because of merit. But even if we get that wrong, but there's a child in Simaning Hamatlala and can look up and say a black person can be a CEO, that already for me is worth the pain.
It's a win.
It's a win.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
There you go. Hey, man, vote. Make your choice. Make sure that you vote, though.
Yeah. Whatever happens, vote.
Do you know, I think out of 37 million registered voters in the last election, only 17 million made it to the polls.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
Why did you register then?
Yeah.
Because our numbers are higher now with the registration.
The numbers are high. It's about 27 million. Every time elections come, they say this is a turnout election. But one of the things that we think drive people to vote, we spoke about fear, and it has been called white fear versus black expectations.
Oh, yeah.
The black people have realized the expectations are not being realized. So they are not motivated to go vote. But those that are driven by fear, they see a need to show up. So we risk actually having a low turnout that determines the outcome of elections.
That's what happened in Swane.
Absolutely.
That's why the Swane elections during the Sputla days.
So go out and vote regardless of who you vote for.
Yeah. That's the message. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dad.
Thank you.
King David Studio Podcast.